Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Brélade.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Présent.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Croix. Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Labby. Monsieur le deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Luce.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Dublé. Monsieur le deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Lehegara. Monsieur le deputy Ayer.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Alves. Madame le deputy Gardner. Monsieur le deputy Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Moore. Monsieur le deputy Mezek.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Balash.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Coles.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Poré.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy War.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Scott. Monsieur le deputy Renouf.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Felton.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Binet.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Howell.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et la puissance de la terre, pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions qu'il te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien-être du surgissement du peuple, qu'il t'a plu de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné de t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonnons nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie pas en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi le règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier.
Défaut.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Labby.
Oh, okay, should you do it? Deputy Labby is malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le deputy Labby est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé.
Malade.
Madame le deputy Dublé.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Alves.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Moore.
Sir, Deputy Moore is accompanying a close family member to a medical appointment this morning and asked to be excused. She should be in later.
Member's content to mark the deputy excusé. Excusé.
Madame le deputy Scott.
Defo. Les états sont constitués. Members will be saddened to hear of the death of the former Constable of St Martin, Silva Yates, who passed away at his home on Monday night, aged 91. Silvanus Arthur Yates, known throughout his life as Silva, was born on the 14th of October 1934 in Tidworth, Hampshire, but his family was from Jersey. He went to school at St Peter's Primary. His family moved to England in 1940 for the duration of the war. But he returned home in 1948 and finished his education at Victoria College in 1952. He began his career in the early 1950s as part of the Civil Service Commission within the Ministry of Defence Mechanical Engineering Section. Between 1957 and 69, he worked in a light engineering business in Jersey before setting up his own business, designing and building boats. He was married to Nancy, and together they had 5 children, 4 sons and a daughter. And several of his members of the family are here today in the gallery, and we welcome you. Silva Yates was an active member of the Honorary Police in his parish of St Martin and was elected Constable in June 2006 and re-elected unopposed in 2008. As a Constable, he spoke infrequently in the States, but was described by former Senator Francis O'Grady as having a knack of saying in a few words what some people would say in 20 minutes. Perhaps his most memorable speech came during a debate on the transfer of health funds from Social Security to health, where he spoke of his grandmother's household accounting system, which involved money being placed in jars on the mantelpiece to cover the various household costs, and a separate small pot in which she kept ship halfpennies, which were used to fund any medicines required. He drew comparison with that second and separate pot and the health insurance fund. And this resonated with members and was in fact repeated by Senator O'Grady, then Social Security Minister, when the matter came before the States again in 2012. He was a man of independent thought and would often vote differently from his fellow constables. His work on scrutiny involved a review of the income support system, social housing, home buy, and income support benefit levels. He retired from the States in 2011, but maintained an active and keen interest in parish life, particularly as a member of the St Martin Housing Association. He regularly attended annual CPA events, including one held early this year, and proudly represented Jersey at the CPA conference in Gibraltar in 2008, a place where his father had served in the armed forces. Our thoughts are with his family, his children and grandchildren, and others who know him well at this difficult time. And I invite members to stand and reflect on Mr. Yates and his contribution to the work of the States. May he rest in peace. We now return to the order paper.
Sir, before we start public business, I'd just like to let the Assembly know that I will have to leave at 12 o'clock to attend a hospital appointment, but I will be back after lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy.
Sir, could I raise the
Yes,
defo on the Constable of St Helier?
Members content the defo is raised. The defo is raised on the Constable of St Helier. Next item of public business is the draft dogs amendment regulations lodged by the Comité des Connétables. The main respondent is the chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel. I'll ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Dogs Law, Jersey Amendment Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Article 13C of the Dogs Jersey Law 1961.
Yes. Connétable.
Thank you, sir. So I'd like to start my speech by declaring an interest in that I share a residence with two Dachshunds who consider themselves dangerous but do not fit the characteristics I'll highlight later. I mention this, sir, to highlight the fact that two dogs of the same breed can have different personalities, with one being more tolerant of children than the other. I'm less inclined to let one off a lead near children despite training early on in its life, but I'll come back to children further on in my speech. The aim of the proposed amendments to the Dogs Jersey Law 1961 is to strengthen public safety, align our island with other jurisdictions, and, most importantly, protect children. The proposals will define what is a dangerous dog and set out clear requirements for the keeping of such dogs. The aim, sir, is to introduce a registration scheme for dogs which meet the criteria of a dangerous dog as set out in the new Article 1B. This means a dog of a type listed such as a Dogo Argentino, a Brazilian Mastiff, a Japanese Tosa, a Pit Bull Terrier, and an XL Bully Dog. A person, sir, must have regard to guidance about the dog type which is published by the state's veterinary officer. That guidance includes a dog that may fit the characteristics and measurements of an XL Bully, such as an American XL Bully, an American Staffordshire Terrier, an American Staffordshire Bull Terrier, an American Bulldog, a Cane Corso, or a Presa Corso. One might ask, sir, why these particular dogs? Dogs have been our best friends for centuries, and Jersey is home to over 10,000 dogs, which are family pets, working dogs with police and customs, lifelong companions which take part in our joy and well-being, with some finding roles in schools and as therapy dogs and as, of course, companions for the blind. However, sir, the dogs which fall under the dangerous dog category have been bred for different purposes. They are large, muscular dogs of a certain breed or type with guarding instincts, status, and an increased bite force. And they've been bred for herding cattle and livestock, hunting large game, and security and fighting purposes. As a side note, so the term dangerous dog should not be conflated with a dog dangerously out of control. The Dogs Law already has provisions for any dog that is dangerously out of control in Article 11A of that law. It would be appropriate, sir, at this juncture to remind members of the unfortunate and recent case of a family XL bully attack in Wales, where a 9-month-old baby was killed, as was confirmed by the Gwent police earlier this month on the 5th of November. This is the latest in a number of attacks in recent times. In Jersey, between 2013 and 2023, there were 9 recorded incidents involving pit bull type dogs, 7 of biting other dogs and 2 of biting people. In the UK in 2023, there were 16 fatal dog attacks, more than double the 6 fatalities recorded in 2022. Around half of these deaths were linked to XL bully dogs. In the UK, sir, XL bully dogs were added to the Dangerous Dogs Act from October the 31st, 2023, and since the 31st of December that year, it has been illegal to breed, sell, or rehome these dogs. Existing XL bullies must be muzzled and leashed in public, and it is now a criminal offence to own or possess one without a valid certificate of exemption. In France, there are two categories of dangerous dogs. Category 1, banned breeds, and Category 2, restricted breeds. Restrictions in France include compulsory third-party insurance, vaccinations, sterilisation, and the requirement that such dogs are kept on a lead and muzzled in public, including on public transport. The proposed amendments for Jersey mirror these restrictions with adjustments for our jurisdiction, such as the minimum age for ownership being 18. The focus, sir, is on implementing restrictions on dangerous dog ownership to prohibit breeding and emphasising public safety measures, such as always being walked on a lead, being neutered, and being muzzled in public places. The reason we feel so that Jersey needs the proposed controls is that there is presently no means of restricting numbers of the type of breed mentioned. Whilst the state's veterinary officer is currently aware of a number of dogs that may fall within the definition of a dangerous dog, there are no powers to control or impose conditions to enhance public safety. The veterinary officer, sir, has given advice to a number of dog owners that Jersey is looking towards adopting similar conditions to the UK, but a litter of XL bully puppies was born in 2024. These puppies now are of breeding age. We are keen, sir, that the legislation is enacted without delay. There are potentially 30 plus dogs of breed or type on the island which may meet the criteria of a dangerous dog. The new restrictions for dogs classified as dangerous dogs in Jersey are proposed to be as follows. They must always be kept muzzled and on a lead in public places. They must be under the control of a person aged 18 above. The owner must always hold valid third-party public liability insurance approved by the veterinary officer. There must be one sole registered owner. The dog must be kept in a secure location in order that it can't escape. There will be a prohibition on breeding and requirements enforced to neuter a dangerous dog to mitigate the numbers increasing in the island. There will be a prohibition on abandoning, giving way, selling or transferring a dangerous dog. All dangerous dogs must be microchipped. These are not new or untested ideas. We are mirroring restrictions already imposed elsewhere, such as the UK and France. The amendments are intended to be preventative. Before the numbers of dangerous dogs increase in Jersey, such requirements have already been adopted by our close neighbour countries, the UK and France, which makes the island vulnerable to imports of these types of dogs if we don't have our own restrictions in place. The process proposed is that the state's veterinary officer will register all dogs meeting the dangerous dog criteria. It is considered that, given the low numbers estimated, that there is sufficient resource within her department to deal with it. The Jersey registration scheme will require the state's veterinary officer to maintain a register of dangerous dogs, and it will be an offence to own a dangerous dog unless it's registered with the state's veterinary officer. The sole registered owner of a dangerous dog must comply with the conditions imposed by the veterinary officer mentioned previously. The parishes will be liaising with the veterinary officer under a data sharing agreement to ensure that all dogs which may fit the characteristics of being a dangerous dog are contacted. The state's veterinary officer will be issuing correspondence to those potential dog owners impacted. A parish dog licence will only be issued if the dog is registered as a dangerous dog with the veterinary officer and the insurance is maintained. Parish websites, which is the dog licensing portal and internal administration processes, will be updated to reiterate dangerous dog restrictions accordingly. The committee will liaise and notify customs, professional dog walking businesses, vets, pet shops, States of Jersey Police, DFDS, and Jersey Aero Club, amongst others, of the new restrictions. The aim, sir, is to align the proposed amendments and their enforcement to take effect before the dog licensing registration renewals in January 2026. Mindful, sir, of our obligations under the UN Convention on the Rights of a Child, I turn now to the impact on children's rights. A full CRIA has been prepared and published, and the findings are as follows. Only positive impacts have been identified. The safety and protection of children in public must be our priority. The proposed amendments are in line with the Island Plan, which seeks to protect and enhance the amount of open space available across the island. These proposed measures prohibit dangerous dogs from being walked in public off lead and oblige them to wear a muzzle, thus implementing public safety measures. Areas of play, including beaches, parks, leisure and sports facilities, natural woodland environment, cycle and footpath routes are included, sir. The proposed controls aim to mitigate the risk of dangerous dog attacks which have taken place in other jurisdictions. No negative impacts have been identified. All children will be positively impacted if these amendments are adopted. The ultimate goal, sir, is simple: for Jersey to be and to continue to be a safe place for children. We must also recognise, sir, the evidence. Children are among the most vulnerable victims of dog attacks in the US. 29.4% of fatal dog attacks involve children aged between 1 and 4. More than half, 56.7% of victims killed by dog attacks were aged 16 or under. Young children are at a far greater risk because they cannot always recognise the signs of aggression, and their behaviour may inadvertently provoke a response, and their small size makes them less able to survive an attack. These stark facts emphasise the necessity of implementing robust measures to mitigate the risks of encountering dangerous dogs in public and play facilities. So there have been some late submissions to the Environment Scrutiny Panel with whom we've been working from the JSPCA and the States of Jersey Police. So there were 2 meetings held in June and September with the JSPCA, and it's worth mentioning, sir, that there is an agreement in place between the parishes and the JSPCA to collect and house stray dogs. This will include the dogs that fall under the category of dangerous dog. Discussions have been held to locate a local trained dog handler, because I appreciate that handling a dangerous dog is a specialised duty. And discussions have been held with a trained dog handler for dealing with dangerous out-of-control dogs, and one dog trainer has been contacted and keen to discuss further. It seems to me, sir, that the committee will need to incorporate that process in their contract with the JSPCA. I also note, sir, that JSPCA has offered muzzle training. With regard to the States of Jersey Police, I had a conversation yesterday with an officer responsible for the area. And whilst the Article 7, I think it is, of the existing dogs law, so I'm just confirming that Article 11, bracket 7 of the dogs law existing, indicates that the dog seized under paragraph 2 or 4 shall be transferred to and detained at an establishment suitable for the reception of dangerous dogs, including any premises in the ownership or control of the state's police force, and dealt with thereafter in accordance with this law. The reality, sir, is that the States of Jersey Police no longer have a facility, and this is something that we need to discuss amongst ourselves to see how that can be provided should the need arise. I'd like to think there will be little in the way of need should this legislation be approved by the Assembly and we don't get an influx of dangerous dogs. But clearly, sir, there is a gap, shall we say, in the provision, and that is historic and applying already. And I am prepared to draw the various parties together to discuss how we might achieve a facility to provide for the retention of dangerous dogs and their handling should the need arise. So, sir, I'm well aware that the police are not presently resourced to deal with any errant or dangerous or indeed out of control dogs, which is another area which we'll need to be looking at, but this is not the law to be dealing with that, and I'm prepared to commit to bring the various agencies together in order to achieve an equitable solution. So the amendments proposed to Articles 5 and 9 revolve around a collar and what might go on the collar in Article 5. The present situation is that it is an obligation for a dog owner to have on their dog's collar the name and address, name of dog and telephone number. We are proposing, sir, that be altered to just have the name of the dog, the telephone number, and in fact the dog registration number, which with our new technology is available and once allocated to a dog remains with them for life. The risk of an address, for one, is that an address can be quite large to put on the small disc, and I think it's something which isn't done universally. And in all practical terms, a dog's disc can be the size of a penny, which is, members will realise, is limited in space. So this is just a practical proposal to utilise modern day technology. Article 9, sir, referred to, in the previous iteration of the amendment, to damage to agricultural land. It wasn't clear, sir, how that could be progressed through a court process. And whilst we are cognizant that there is a need to do further work on that, we will be doing that and discuss with stakeholders how that can be best achieved, and also, of course, with the prosecuting centenniers. So at this point, I therefore make the proposition and look forward to answering members' questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Constable. Are the principles seconded? Deputy Lease.
Thank you, sir. And so when I came back into government earlier last year, one of the first things I said to officers was that I wanted action on XL bullies. I found it unconscionable that I would sleep at night if something happened while I was Minister and I hadn't taken action. Of course, in my naivety, I was reminded quite quickly that this particular law doesn't sit under my jurisdiction and was for the Comité de Connétable. So I apologise to the chairman, my assistant minister, who has received irregular emails from myself since that time to pester him as to where this amendment was and why it wasn't coming forward. But I'm grateful now, and I stand today, sir, in full support of the committee who have highlighted this urgent need to implement safeguarding measures in respect of XL bully dogs. As a dog owner myself, I understand the loyalty, the companionship, the sheer frustration and the joy that comes with having a pet, but we must also confront the reality that the XL bully type dog in its current form and without the implementation of safeguard measures poses a well-evidenced and escalating threat to public safety. We in this Assembly have a duty to our communities and a duty to protect the fundamental right of every citizen to feel safe, and in this particular regard, the island's laws need strengthening. So we're not here to demonise any specific breed, but what we do need to look at is the wider evidence. A number of serious and fatal attacks involving XL bullies has increased dramatically in recent years, and the number of XL bully type dogs, as the Constable has already said, in Jersey has grown. These dogs are often far larger, more muscular and more powerful than other breeds, and they are capable of inflicting serious injuries in a matter of seconds. Their bite strength and body mass make them more likely to inflict life-threatening injuries quickly, and it is more difficult to prevent harm once they begin attacking, even with the efforts of multiple adults. Sometimes the dogs show unpredictable behaviour. Some attacks come from dogs with no known aggression history, shocking even their well-experienced owners. Authorities in the UK have reported cases where dogs turned suddenly, sometimes due to pain, triggers or stress. In 2023, there were 16 fatal dog attacks in England and Wales, more than double the 6 fatalities recorded in 2022. Around half of these deaths were linked to XL bully dogs. These dogs, originally bred from pit bull types for strength and size, can weigh up to 80 kilograms and possess powerful jaws capable of inflicting severe injuries. Let me be clear, sir. Most dog owners are fully responsible, but responsible ownership alone is not enough. A loving owner is not a substitute for effective control measures. That's why we must implement control measures to minimise the risk of an incident. I'm supporting the call for mandatory safeguard measures for the ownership of XL bully dogs, and those to include keeping the dog on a lead and muzzled in public, prohibiting breeding, prohibiting selling them or giving them away, and prohibiting abandoning the dog. I reiterate that these measures are not an attack on the breed. They are a protection measure for the public, because without safeguards there could be a serious incident, as there have been increasingly in England and Wales. We must act with compassion, but also with courage and common sense. Just as we regulate vehicles, chemicals, and other potentially dangerous tools, we must regulate the ownership and handling of XL bullies. Safeguard measures are not punishment, they are protections. Through the implementation of clear, enforceable safeguard measures for XL-type bully dogs, we can promote public safety, support responsible ownership, and ensure that our policies reflect both accountability and animal welfare concerns. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Joan.
Thank you, sir. And I'm speaking as Chair of the Environment, Housing and Infrastructure Scrutiny Panel to outline the panel's position on the draft Dogs Law Amendment regulations and to summarise the key findings of our scrutiny work. The panel published its first set of comments in late September after receiving briefings from the committee, and since then, following the decision of the committee to defer the debate, we have held a public hearing and received additional evidence from the committee, parish officials and the state's vet, which we have issued an additional comments paper after this work. This has been put on the order paper, but I have discovered that the new comments paper is not displayed on the state's website, where P63 is referenced for those who want to go and find it. I want to begin by recognising the steps that have been taken since our initial comments were lodged. The panel welcomes the fact that the committee has responded to the concerns raised by both the panel and the state's stakeholders and lodged an amendment which in our view represents a more balanced and proportionate approach to some areas of the law that the amendments would have affected all dog owners. In particular, we welcome the clarification and amendment to the new Article 6, which will no longer require every dog owner to replace or update their tags by February 2026. That original proposal would have created unnecessary costs for dog owners. The revised approach requiring the addition of the licence number on the tag to be added when it's a new registration, change of address or change of phone number is a sensible and more proportionate adjustment. On the new Article 9, the panel is also pleased the committee has removed the new wording on damaged agricultural land. In their proposed amendments, that amendment was not properly consulted upon, as it would have affected all dog owners, yet the intent was unclear, including definitions and enforcement. The committee's commitment to undertake a separate consultation-led review of livestock worrying provisions involving the farming community and animal welfare experts is the right next step. The panel heard from members of the public who highlighted both gaps in enforcement and a lack of clarity around what counts as agricultural land. For example, there is a lack of clarity if the law covers chickens kept in someone's garden or sheep grazing on the north coast, areas where dogs have previously made attacks and caused serious damage. After careful deliberation, the panel is broadly supportive of the introduction of a new registration scheme for dangerous dogs, which will strengthen public safety by ensuring that ownership is properly regulated, recorded, and subject to clear conditions. We also support the creation of new restrictions, including requirements for insurance, public control, and neuting, which are designed to reduce risk to people and to protect animals. We are very aware of the terrible attack on a baby recently in the UK and others in the past. All are shocking and awful situations that could have been prevented, and we need to do what we can to protect especially children and babies. However, we do have some remaining concerns in these amendments. Firstly, the panel remains disappointed that consultation throughout the drafting process was not as robust or transparent as it should have been. The panel only became aware of some of the key proposed changes during our review, not during initial briefings. This lack of clarity undermines confidence in how legislation changes are being communicated, especially when they impact thousands of islanders. The panel is concerned that the states of Jersey Police were only consulted late in the development of this legislation, which limited their ability to provide meaningful input, particularly on provisions that specifically reference their role in enforcement. While I believe the police have welcomed the introduction of a register for dangerous dogs, they have raised concerns about the lack of suitable facilities and trainings to manage such cases. For example, new Article 11 provides that a police officer may seize a dog believed to be dangerously out of control. However, there appears to be no current provision for trained or licensed dog handlers within the police force, nor clarity on whether specialist officers or resources will be made available to fulfil this function in the future. Further, new Article 11.7 states that a seized dangerous dog must be detained in a facility suitable for the reception of dangerous dogs, including any premises in the ownership or control of the state's police force. There seems to be no such facility currently existing in Jersey. The panel would like clarification from the committee on how it intends these provisions to be implemented in practice, should the law be adopted, and what plans exist to establish or fund an appropriate facilities and trainings. I'm concerned that we only hear now, today, from the Connotab of recognition of this lack of facilities and handling and training, as it was never raised with the panel that this was a concern or how the committee will mitigate this. The panel received correspondence late last week from the JSPCA, who stated that they were not consulted on the development of the dangerous dog provisions. Given the JSPCA's operational role in both welfare and enforcement, this was a missed opportunity. Their perspective could have strengthened the drafting and reduced ambiguity around enforcement. They have raised concerns that they also do not have facilities or trained staff to handle dangerous dogs. Even though the Connotab has countered these concerns, I would like to seek comfort from the JSPCA themselves to ensure any of their comments in their letter received last week is now abated. The panel believes this highlights a broad issue that structured formal consultation with enforcement and operational bodies must become standard practice in the development of any further legislation affecting public safety. Thirdly, we have highlighted the need for clearer justification of the breed-specific approach taken in relation to dangerous dogs. The JSPCA and other welfare experts have cautioned that behaviour and ownership practices are often stronger predictions of risk than breed alone. This has also been raised in a petition with, to date, over 595 islanders signing supporting these calls. While the State's Vet acknowledged the issue is complex, the panel has not yet seen a clear evidence base for the approach adopted. We therefore recommend the committee set out its reasoning and consider alternative frameworks focused more on responsible ownership and behaviour-based regulation. Fourthly, we are concerned about resourcing and capacity within the State's Veterinary Office to introduce and operate the new registration scheme. While we received a letter of comfort from the Assistant Minister for the Environment that advised that the Department did not anticipate any unreasonable impact from the implementation, it was acknowledged that if there was significant non-compliance with the new regulation requirements, this could increase the impact on staff, time and resources. We remain concerned that the department's response underestimates the potential resource implication and notes that the new Article 5B5 of the proposition grants the Minister an order-making power to prescribe fees for the registration of dangerous dogs. And I would urge the Minister to make use of this power to ensure that the State's Veterinary Office is appropriately resourced to deliver the scheme effectively, especially given budget constraints for his department going into 2026. Finally, the panel wishes to stress the importance of a joined-up approach to dog control and animal welfare legislation. The current legal framework spans several separate laws and regulations, from the Dogs Law 1961 to the Animal Welfare Law, the Policing of Beaches and the Parks Regulation. That complexity risks creating gaps or inconsistencies, especially around enforcement and general dog control of dogs. We urge the committee and the government more broadly to ensure any future reforms are coordinated across these related areas. We appreciate the committee's responsiveness to scrutiny and public concern, but we remain of the view that stronger consultation, clearer evidence and a more coherent framework are essential if these amendments are to command public confidence and be effectively enforced. We fully recognise that time is of the essence. There is an urgent need to take action on dangerous dogs, particularly as their numbers continue to rise in Jersey. However, it would be remiss of me as chair and of my panel to overlook the significant gaps and weaknesses in the legislation drafting and consultation process that have been brought to us to this point. Therefore, as outlined in Standing Order 83, I would like to propose a reference back, sir.
Well, you need to specify under Standing Order 83 what further information relating to the proposition should be provided to the states, or what ambiguity or inconsistency information relating to the proposition which has been given to the states needs to be clarified. So you need to specify what is the purpose of the reference back that you propose.
Absolutely, sir. As outlined in my speech to the proposition, the panel's concern is that the proposition has been brought forward without sufficient consultation or supporting analysis. The Committee to Conoptabs has not demonstrated that key stakeholders, including the JSPCA and the States of Jersey Police, were meaningfully engaged, and we only hear last minute today from the Conotab of potential mitigation measures, but I'm concerned this was thought of only after scrutiny has raised concerns and discussions of reference back and not integrated or risk assessed into the legislation development. The panel is requesting also reference back so that this consultation can take place, which should include consideration of alternative approaches to addressing concerns of dangerous dogs, as highlighted by the JSPCA, who do not believe that a breed-specific approach would be effective or appropriate in Jersey. It's also I should like to highlight in this reference back that the police have highlighted that there's a lack of trained dog handlers or facilities once a dangerous dog is seized, and I would like to hear from the committee proposed solutions that will reduce this gap. And I would like to ask for this reference back to enable the committee to undertake this work and return to the States Assembly with answers without these outstanding concerns, and follow more an in-depth process with supporting analysis demonstrating that the proposal is evidence-based and shows clear consideration of alternative approaches.
So would the Speaker give way as well, sir?
Yes, would you, before she does that, so I've made a note, Deputy Jern, the purpose of the reference back, I'm just summarising it: further consultation and supporting analysis, engagement with State Jersey Police and the JSPCA, and explore other ways of dealing with dangerous dogs. Does that sufficiently capture much of it, or? I'm just so I can summarise to members the purpose of the reference back.
Yes, sir, and also to provide mitigating measures for when a dangerous dog has to be seized by the police or the JSPCA, that there is sufficient, that is at all possible in Jersey at this moment, and if it's not possible, what are the steps to make it possible in the future? And when it's regarding the dangerous dogs, the alternative approaches to addressing concerns of dangerous dogs, to understand why a breed-specific approach was chosen rather than other approaches. So to understand a bit more evidence-based of why that was.
And are you prepared to give way to a point of clarification for Telio?
Yes.
Yes, Telio.
I'm wondering if the member would also clarify whether she believes there needs to be clarification on 4 further points, which the constable raised, one of which is that what goes on the collar of the said dog. There is controversy about actually, for security reasons, what one should put on there. 2, whether there are sufficient safeguards in terms of the criminal background checks for those who would own such dogs. 3, how the facility that the constable referred to for training such dogs will work, how it will be funded and when it will open. And 4, also what happens to dogs that are no longer wanted if they cannot be transferred, because ownership cannot be transferred, and whether there are sufficient alternatives to euthanising. Does the chair of the scrutiny panel think that those are all also areas that need to be clarified in the reference back?
Absolutely. I believe some of those I did mention in my speech before, but I realise I may have had to reference back first and then done my speech, because my speech did say some of those things. But yes, I also, those are important for the reference back.
Yes, Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. Please may I raise the deaf?
Well, forgive me. But yes, members content? Now, a reference back has been proposed. Is it seconded?
Sir, I was just wondering if I could ask for a point of clarification as well, please.
Yes, you content to accept another point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Deputy Morrell.
Yes, thank you. I was just wondering if, in asking for a reference back, if the chair could clarify whether there is a mechanism for the panel to call this legislation in, or if that is really the reason for the reference back is because there is no mechanism. I don't know.
No, we are able to call it back, and we could potentially, after this, if the reference back is not passed. But for us, we felt that there was so many lack of clarity in many of these things that it's for the Comité de Connotables to bring to us the scrutiny or to the Assembly, rather than for us to do at this stage more work than we have done already.
So we're now debating a reference back, unless members want to, the members who've put on their lights to do Rob Ward, is for the clarification?
Yes, it is for clarification.
Yes.
I've lost track of what the reference back is for.
Well, there were lots of things.
Because there was a lot of things added. There's about 9 things on the list now, so thank you.
Yes, the purpose of the reference back is further consultation and supporting analysis from the Comité, engagement with the State Treasury Police and the JSPCA, exploring other ways of dealing with dangerous dogs other than a breed-specific approach, further consideration of mitigating measures in respect of the seizure of dogs, information on background checks to owners, training of handlers, and further consideration of the fate of unwanted or abandoned dogs.
And maybe the collar, sir?
Yes, what was your point about the collar again?
It's just about what information should legitimately go on the collar for security.
That is referred to specifically by the amendment on the draft law, but you want that added to?
Yeah, I think it is. Yes, sir.
Right. So that's the purpose of the reference back. Deputy Dublé, do you want to speak in the debate, or do you want to ask a question of clarification for the
I'll be guided
proposer?
by you, sir, because I'm not sure if this is something that can be dealt with now as a point of clarification, but I've just written down the points that you listed there.
Yes.
It seems to me that many of them are already dealt with in the legislation or could be dealt with by guidance after the legislation, and I just wanted somebody to reflect on that. And also it seems to me that the procedure for seizure of dangerous dogs, well, I've looked at the legislation, and that's already a procedure that is part of the legislation, so I'm not sure how that is currently working and whether there is any more information that could be sought. I think where I sit with this at the moment, and this is a speech, I suppose, I would rather carry on with the debate, because the point made by the proposer of the legislation about children's rights, I think is really important. And the proposer of the reference back herself mentioned that time is of the essence. And weighing those things up with the points raised, I actually think that it is most important that we put the legislation in place and have the protections there. And I believe that some of these points raised could be dealt with procedures and guidance subsequently.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else want to speak about the reference back? Deputy Gorst.
Thank you, sir. I'm not sure if I need to declare an interest, being an owner of 2 dogs, a Labrador and a Spaniel, but they are only dangerous in the context to those who don't like to be licked or have to tickle their tummies. I'm not sure as if the microphone picked up that comment. I suppose it depends who's walking the dogs. The reality is that government and legislative processes are purposefully slow, so that they can be thought through, they can be consulted upon, and they can be appropriately considered. Sometimes that is a frustration to the public, and in a fast-moving world, it's difficult for legislatures and governments to compete with expectation for instant action. This, I think, sir, is one of those rare occasions where we can take action today, we can approve the legislation in advance of something awful happening to an islander at the hands of a dangerous dog, as described in this legislation. So whilst I appreciate the concerns of the scrutiny panel, and they've done good work, for my part, the benefit of approving this legislation today and getting on with designating these breeds as this breed, should I say, as dangerous dogs, so that we don't have an incident or a fatality, as we've seen happen elsewhere with these breeds, far outweighs a need for a reference back, because I think all of the questions that have been asked and all of the issues that the scrutiny panel wishes to see addressed in a more fulsome manner can be done during the process of getting this legislation on the statute books. And, I, as a dog owner, don't like all of the things around what's going to have to buy new collar bands. But that, again, is a minute inconvenience to me and to other dog owners in light of the overarching benefit that this piece of legislation will bring. So I ask that members consider very carefully. We are in a position to be able to take action in advance of something awful happening in Jersey. Do we really want to delay when something awful could happen in that intervening period because of the puppies that we've heard about that are now reaching breeding age? It's a simple equation for me, and I've got to take the action today, and I will be, and that's why I cannot support the Chair's request for a reference back. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Leases.
Thank you, sir, and I just stand to thank Deputy Doublé and Deputy Gorse for their words. All I can say to Assembly members is please do not miss the point here. This is the second delay. It's very frustrating, and I just ask them to think how would we feel if something happens, a child dies while we are here pontificating over the detail of how many letters on a tag on a collar. We surely can't refer this back today. I implore members to vote in favour of moving forward with this legislation. We can deal with the detail later. We want to deal with the detail, but let's please not miss the point. Let's get this protection in place for the public, and let's get the protection in place today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Tellier.
So this will be scrutinised one way or the other, and I'm firmly of the opinion that this does need, definitely needs further consideration. And it would be much more preferable if that consideration were done holistically from the Council of the Comité de Connétable in this case, taking on board the legitimate concerns, not just from the scrutiny panel that they've raised to date, but also to the wider public on this issue. And there's a big reason for that, which is we should have learnt in the proceedings of the last few weeks that it's highly important to take the public on board with us when we make far-reaching changes. And we're not just talking about some technical issue that is going to affect a few people potentially, because of course the target of this new policy legislation area is of course primarily around dangerous dogs, but it will affect all dogs. It will affect all dog owners, and we know that there are thousands of dogs in the island who are not just animals, not just property, but they are members of the family. And so, sir, it is absolutely right that I also declare an interest. I have a spaniel myself, and I won't necessarily fall into the same trap that the Minister said in any ambiguity, because he can actually get quite narky if he doesn't get his ball immediately when you come home through the door. And what one learns from that, actually, and he's safe, by the way, he's not in any way an aggressive dog. I think some members of the Assembly will know him. And the point I would come to is that, for example, a spaniel which has been trained to be aggressive and to attack people will be more dangerous than an XL bully that has been trained not to attack people. And what does that mean? And the reason I am contextualising this, so I know it's a reference back, and I think this will explain part of the reason why I think a reference back is necessary, because I think the whole ethos and the starting point of this legislation has been incorrect, and therefore the consequences of the route that the committee have taken us down is potentially also incorrect. If I'm allowed to modify the lyrics, or let you do it, members do it themselves, the song I have in my mind is from Goldie Looking Chain from 2004, which says, and if we change the word rappers to maybe dogs, change the word guns from guns to dogs. Guns don't kill people, rappers do. Ask any politician, they'll tell you it's true. So it's not necessarily dogs that are dangerous. Of course, there can be individual differences in the breeds which make their nature different, but it's actually the owners themselves that need to take responsibility and can be dangerous. And the concern I've got, and that the concern, of course, that is widely the case in the UK, is that the starting point is completely different. That there is a gang culture in the UK that doesn't exist in Jersey. There's an underlying criminality that we hear about because it's a bigger country, not necessarily because they're any worse morally. It's just that there are problems that exist in these bigger countries of France and the UK which don't exist in Jersey. We hope that they never come to Jersey. And I'm wondering whether we're trying to legislate here to fill a legislative gap, because of course children do get bitten, and as the Constable said, they're just as likely to get bitten by a spaniel who a child may get in the way, the dog may be getting excited, etc. It doesn't necessarily relate to the breed, although I accept that the harm that the jaws of a dog can also do that, sir. So in getting round to the reference back, sir, I think it is absolutely legitimate that we question not just the articles, because scrutiny can do that. If they call it in, they will be looking at the articles, but actually the starting point to ask whether that is legitimate. We are effectively copy and pasting the UK legislation into Jersey law without appreciating whether or not the Jersey context merits that. And I don't think it does on this occasion. The reason we might want to ask the committee to reconsider even a simple thing like what goes on the collar is that because there is very conflicting advice that responsible dog owners are given about what goes onto the collar of a dog in terms of the tag. So including your dog's name on the collar can be beneficial, one site says, for identification, but it also raises concerns about safety and theft. Some owners choose to put the name of their name on the tag instead of the dog's name, which can help verify the owner without giving potential thieves an advantage. Now, what is the purpose of having a tag on a dog's collar? It's presumably that if you lose your dog, you want somebody to get your dog back, don't you? That's the prime reason for putting details on a dog's collar. And usually, it's sufficient to have a phone number on there, which is your phone number and probably your name, so that if you find a dog roaming around Lekenebe or around St Martin's village or on the Gruville Common, and you say, okay, let's look at the collar, there's a phone number on there, it belongs to Dave or Louise, I'm going to pick up the phone Hi, is Dave there? I think I found your dog. Thank you very much. You cut out the middle person, but if you go to a point where you've got to put other details, you've got to put the dog's name on there. What's the point in putting the dog's name on there? You can't phone the dog up. You've got the dog. So even something as basic as that shows that it hasn't had the requisite thought process that has been put into it. And you know, you might phone the parish hall, but what if the parish hall is shut? You might phone the duty centeneer, but why involve him or her if that's not an issue? Are there sufficient safeguards in terms of any criminal background checks for those who own such dogs? I'm hearing a lot in this legislation about things that will happen to the dog, consequences for the dog if you're an XL bully, if you're a pit bull, whatever dog it is. You have to wear a muzzle. You have to be kept on a lead. What's all that about? What if you're a dog that needs a lot of exercise? These dogs inherently need a lot of exercise. And if you're going to have one of these dogs to effectively live the life of not a pet, but of a caged animal effectively, you have to question, in fact, why these dogs are allowed in the island at all in the first place. I would prefer much more scrutiny to be given of these dog owners to say that actually, if you're somebody who is not a fit and proper person, if you're somebody who's got a criminal background and you're potentially prone to violence and you want to have your dog not as a family pet, but as a security agent for you and as a weapon, then actually you're not the type of person who should be owning a dog. And is there a course that those kind of people should go on? I'm not talking about people with a criminal background. We, of course, do get into the very thorny issue of human rights here, but we also need to consider the rights of the animal and whether or not somebody is a fit and proper person to own a dog. Would we issue the same guidance for guns? We don't do the same for guns, do we? We don't. If somebody goes to the parish hall and says, I want to own a hand pistol, or I want to own an AK-47, or a bazooka, there, of course, is a difference there. But if you can prove that you have a legitimate reason to own a hand pistol or a shotgun, for whatever reason, whether it's for sporting purposes or for legitimate use on your property or on your land, then you won't unreasonably be given a refusal. But I think the constable, if he knows that you're somebody who has got whatever kind of issues, including background issues, that would be an alarm bell. They can refuse a gun licence on that basis. And I would have thought that the committee would also want to have the similar powers to somebody who potentially wants to own a dog, not as a pet, but as a dangerous weapon. And that's completely absent from what is being proposed here in this proposition. We've heard about this facility for training that the constable has proposed, I think, almost on the hoof. We don't know anything about this facility. We don't know how it's going to be funded. We don't know where it's going to go. We don't know who's going to staff it. We don't know how the dogs will be referred there. And the fourth point that I'm particularly keen to know about, what happens to a dog if it's no longer wanted? So one of these XL bullies, any type of these dangerous dogs, we almost seem to be painting something into the legislation which is a catch-22. So somebody's got a dog that they know that they can no longer look after. They may have inherited it or got it for completely innocent purposes, realise it's not the type of dog they want. They no longer want it, but they love that dog. They can't pass it on to anybody. And it's something that I'm not raising, but it's something that the JSPCA in Jersey have raised. The only alternative, if you want to extricate yourself from ownership of this animal, would be to have it euthanized. And that seems to me to be completely disproportionate without having first explored all the other avenues that should be looked at, sir. So in supporting this reference back, so I do this first of all as somebody who does care about humans and about children. I don't want to see people getting attacked or harmed by any type of dog at all. But I also accept the fact that dogs are widely owned in Jersey, that they're part of the family, and that what I think this legislation is legitimately seeking to do in the surface may not actually be fulfilled when it comes to the reality, sir. So the choice is, I think, today is we either refer it back to the Committee de Connotabs, allow them to give it further consideration. I would ask quite reasonably, is this something of an issue that could be raised with their individual parishes through parish assemblies? We know that there are hundreds of dog owners, thousands in St Helier and in the bigger parishes, who must have an interest in the future of policing of dogs. They pay a dog licence for the privilege to own their dogs. Maybe that dog licence isn't enough. Maybe there needs to be dog wardens in Jersey. We don't know how all of this is going to fit together more holistically. So I think I've spoken enough, but I think you get the message, sir, that I am fully in favour of this reference back. It does need more work, and it doesn't mean in referring this back that we're seeking to delay. It just means that we want a proper, workable piece of legislation that covers all the boxes for a Jersey-specific context, not for a copy and paste job for a bigger jurisdiction.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir, and I'm glad to be the third member to rise who has had a Springer Spaniel, because they are definitely a particular type of breed, very energetic, very intelligent, but absolutely they can get a little bit antsy when they haven't been walked properly. So I support this reference back because I feel that there's so many items that have been highlighted by the chair of the panel that we just simply don't have the full and proper answers to. This idea of trying to do things by guidance afterwards becomes very difficult because we know that guidance isn't law. So we're going to create restrictions and problems for individuals for something. And I get really turned around with this idea of a description of a breed, because as we've seen with the XL Bully itself isn't a particular type of breed in its own right. It is something that is crossbred and is something that comes from breeding different dogs together. So are we just not creating a problem that in 10, 20 years' time there's going to be another type of dog that is going to be considered a dangerous dog that we have to add to this list? Why aren't we creating something now which can be reactive at the time, that when we're seeing behaviours of dogs that require better controls of dogs at that point, that we can get a good bit of legislation through our assembly and lead the way? I think Deputy Taddeo has made some very good points about how we look at the people who want to own dogs, why they want to own that particular type of dog. The Constable umbrella says he's got Dachshunds. Now, let's face it, we're not going to be using those as weapons. But however, like I said, when you get dogs that are persistent and crazy, that you have an issue that can come up. So I think there are gaps. I think the idea of we don't have dog handlers at the moment for the police. How are people going to be able to take these dogs away from people who can use them as weapons? Are we going to stick them into JSPCA, which is a charity, and that dog just has to, I'm going to use the term, rot in a cage, because that's what will happen to that dog, which is by no fault of its own, by somebody else's decision to breed them in a particular way. So I personally believe we need to be tackling, breeding is mentioned in the dog's law, but is mentioned specifically for this breed of dog, or this type of dog, where actually we should be taking responsibility, or making people take more responsibility for their choice to breed dogs. There should be better controls around the breeding of dogs, rather than just allowing it to be it almost feels like a free-for-all. There is no condition about breeding a dog. We talk about having a dog license, but it's not a dog license, it's a dog registry, because it's literally only registered because there's nothing that says you have to do this to have any type of dog. And as we know, any type of dog can become aggressive. So there are just so many unanswered questions. It's not that I don't want to support the dog's law as presented, but without this further detail, I certainly wouldn't be able to support it. So, sir, I think the reference back is the right way to go.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. I stand to speak because I am very concerned about the lack of consultation, the lack of research that has gone into the law that's being proposed. Two things have made me concerned about that, sir. The first one was the letter from the JSPCA, which, let's face it, no matter how many dog owners there are in this assembly, none in this assembly are as experienced as the JSPCA in owning and handling dogs. I am not a dog owner, never have been, so I have no particular affiliation to any particular types of dogs or not dogs. But the second thing was, and this is the thing that worries me a great deal, was that even me as a non-lawyer, I have over the years become very aware of a particular piece of legislation that is used as a case study in the UK for how to do bad legislation in a rush. And that piece of legislation, and it worries me if other lawmakers in this assembly don't know about it, is the UK Dangerous Dogs Act 1991. It's renowned for being a rushed piece of legislation which had negative impacts. And just looking up a few kind of review facts about it, because it's now 30-something years old, 1991, it's 34 years old. In the UK, so this is 10 years ago on its 25th anniversary, in the UK since 1991, sadly, 30 people had still died in dog-related incidents, but 21 of those incidents involved dogs that were not prohibited by the law. Speaking to the JSPCA's concerns about breed-specific legislation, as opposed to legislation which mandates ownership behaviours and ownership controls. And I think that is a very valid piece of information. It does concern me that there are clearly two very different types of approaches here. One is breed-specific legislation, another is taking a different approach about owners' behaviours and understandings. And the committee has not entertained the alternative, has not looked, to my understanding, at the alternative. And yet, when you read the submission from the JSPCA, when you read around the subject even a little bit, you do discover that there is a strong cohort of people, and not just people, but professional organisations involved with dogs that believe the latter is the more appropriate approach and will have better protective results for children and adults alike. And so I think it is really important that this is looked at properly. The irony of us rushing through a piece of legislation, knowing about dangerous dogs, knowing that the case study in poor rushed legislation is the UK's Dangerous Dogs Act, does concern me. Today, 34 years later, the UK Dangerous Dogs Act, it is still not seen, as it's been amended various times to try to bring it into the appropriate place. It's still not seen as necessarily being effective in the way that it should be. And certainly attacks on and incidents with people and dogs have been continuing to rise over the many decades since. So it hasn't slowed or stopped those events and attacks. I, as I said, am not a dog owner. I don't have a particular view. I just want to know that we have got the most effective legislation in this area, because I agree with Deputy Doublé, I agree with Deputy Luce, Deputy Gorst, I agree with the Constable of St Brillard and the scrutiny panel. We want to protect people in this island from dog attacks. But we need to make sure we're doing it in the right way, in the correct way. And I asked earlier about the prospect of calling this in, and I think it was Deputy Tadia actually in his speech who kind of implied, or at least referred to, the fact that obviously if you call it in, you can only look at the articles. The course of action has been set. As I'm saying, the course of action actually is the bit we need to look at. Should we go down the single breed, the breed-specific route, or should we take other routes, which the RSPCA and the JSPCA are both in agreement with, is the way that we should go, not down the breed-specific route. So I do think it is a fundamental review that needs to be done here, a fundamental look at the path we are taking. If it wasn't for that, then I would say just call it in. But because there is evidence from the professionals in this area that suggests strongly that we are potentially going down the wrong route, I think it's really important that we look at that. And I think the scrutiny panel are correct that it's the proposers of the law who should make sure that that work is done, rather than leaving it to others to do that work for them. So I have to say that I am in favour of the reference back. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Chair of the Committee.
Thank you, sir. I thought I would just read from a letter from the State's veterinary officer, which was given to me some time ago, and it may assist members. She says, sir, I'm not aware of any charities in the UK being in favour of the UK legislation change. Most argue regarding the inefficiency of breed-specific controls and are in favour of specific dog behaviour assessments. But this is not realistic. And what would happen, sir, if a dog assessed as not aggressive would cause a fatality? Liability? Who would assess the over 10,000 dogs in Jersey? And as was indicated earlier, it was discussed before that several other countries have similar legislation in place, including France. And it's also pointed out, sir, that any intention to delay the amendment will result in an increase in the number of XL bully type dogs and wider welfare concerns in the future. So I wouldn't wish to be unreasonable, and I listened to what members have said. And if it would help, I'd be happy to accept a reference back, but it has to be to the next sitting if that is doable, on the basis that I don't think we should delay this legislation any further, and if members would accept that reference back to the next sitting, that would seem to be a pragmatic way forward. Thank you, sir.
Do you want to speak?
I was going to speak, sir. Given the Chair's comments, maybe it's not necessary. The only point I was going to say was that we are discussing here the reference back, and certain other aspects have been introduced regarding dog ownership and dog control. I have previously spoken to the Chair of the committee and others that one area of absence of legislation relates to professional dog owners, and I was going to raise in the main debate that this will be a useful opportunity to introduce actual legislation rather than rely on the code of conduct. But that's just so that is, I think the Chair of the committee has almost pledged to look at other aspects of dog control in any event. So I'm happy to park that for the moment. And certainly, I'm in a difficult position, so in the sense that I am a member of the Environment Scrutiny Panel, and I accept the concerns raised by the Chair. I'm also a member of the committee, so if there were a vote on this, I would feel obliged to abstain. But in view of the Chair's comments, maybe we are proceeding to a consensus. Thanks, sir.
So, Chair of the committee, the matter could come back at the next meeting of the Assembly, and you're saying you're not against a reference back?
I'm not, sir, provided it comes on the agenda on the 25th, so I think that would be a pragmatic solution.
That's your wish, then it would do. I still want to speak. Deputy Miller, you still wish to speak?
Sir, I was going to pose the reference back. I think we should get on and do something rather than
There'll still be a vote on it.
So can I ask for clarification from I just want to know what the normal time is for bringing it. I'm concerned there's not enough time for a reference, but it's less than 2 weeks we have now. We're not on the normal cycle. And if further constables speak, could I ask them to address the issue of whether there's enough time to do proper consultation?
Deputy Hegerer.
Thank you, sir. Yes, there has been a lack of consultation which is identified by all those parties in relation to the States of Jersey Police. What I will say, though, sir, is that from my understanding of this is that if we don't bring in this legislation fairly swiftly, then this will mean that we have lost 12 months because those animals that fit that certain criteria will not be registered as of the 1st of January 2026. From my perspective, sir, in reality, the States of Jersey Police, if we're talking about my specific area of responsibility, do not have dog handlers, and I would suggest it's probably unlikely that they will have one in the next 12 months due to resourcing, etc. But more importantly, they do not have kennelling either. Previously at the Rouge-Boyon old site, there was some facilities that you could have taken in, so there is a lack of training. However, this won't change from now, probably for the next 6 months. So yes, we can have the consultation with the committee, etc., but this in reality will not change in the next 3 months, 6 months, because there is nobody trained as a dog handler, and even if you recruited one tomorrow, it is going to take a significant period for that person to have a dog, to be trained, and to be able to assist with that facility. In relation to the person that the constable talks about, yes, they've had a conversation, and obviously the States of Jersey Police, as they always do, will work to support both kennelling and training. And I'm aware that the chair of the committee actually said that they were looking at the possible person. So in reality, sir, I just wanted to make the point that the delaying of this will make no difference if it's, 2 months or whatever, because training and the facility requirement will take some time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Rob Ward.
Thank you, sir. I actually do not support a reference back. When I look at this reference back, there are 8 parts to this reference back. The first one, and I will try to focus on the reference back because the debate has gone way beyond that, and that's a very key point regards this reference back. The first thing asked about consultation. Now, I don't know how you're going to measure an appropriate level of consultation because that is a qualitative thing and it's opinion. There's not enough consultation there, or there is enough consultation. And we've just heard that some things can be consulted on as much as you want, but there is a reality of what we actually have to do. And we've heard about the State of Jersey Police engagement. This reference back seems to be asking for us for different methods to be explored. So I'm concerned that that is not actually in line with Article 83.2, which says that the proposition cannot be referred back if the effect would be to prevent the debate on the proposition resuming at a future meeting. If we are going to resume on a completely different approach, a completely different piece of legislation, we're not going to be resuming to debate this. And my point would be, don't have the reference back, just vote against it if you don't agree with it. And I think that's what we're here for. We're here to say, I do or I do not agree with legislation. Vote for or vote against. In terms of mitigations received, all of the points made in this reference back, I do not know how they are going to be brought back as a reference back, sir, with any new information that's not going to affect this debate that isn't already there. I think what these 8 things are a scrutiny process. They are a scrutiny review on this piece of legislation. So call it in and do a piece of scrutiny, but be very careful as to what you're going to bring back. Also, sir, I'm trying to stick to the reference back. I think we have got a juxtaposition between the US and UK and Jersey that is being brought to this piece of legislation, which is saying reference back. Well, I don't know. Reference it back because the UK legislation did not work. So are we talking about this piece of legislation for a reference back or not? So there is a wider point I would like to make on this piece of legislation in the main debate, if we ever get to it, regards to dog licences and what could be done. But so I think we need to debate this piece of legislation. I do not understand, and perhaps how this reference back is going to clarify this piece of legislation without simply changing it to do something completely different. And I think there is an interesting position regards talking about background checks on people. It would be interesting if a piece of legislation is brought to say that every owner of a dog would have to have a background check on their character, who they are, etc., and where that would fit with human rights legislation, and whether we would be standing up in this assembly and saying, hold on a second, this is incredibly intrusive into people's rights. So I think this has been turned into, I'm trying to avoid the phrase, which is an obvious one about a dog's dinner. It's going to be said, let it go on Hansard. With this reference back, it is not clarity. I've never seen a reference back before with 8 or 9 pieces of clarification that are required. And I don't know what we'll be debating if we reference this back. We will be debating exactly the same piece of legislation with some more information, or this piece of legislation needs to be amended. Now, these amendments haven't come forward to do the things that have been suggested in the reference back. Amend it. At the moment, sir, I'm a dog owner, I have to declare that. I have a Borodor, a third Border Collie, 2/3 Labrador Retriever. So he is lethal because he has a penchant for laying in dark corridors and doing so very silently. And he has indeed hospitalised one of my family in the nicest possible way, sir, by just simply tripping people up. But you know, that happens. I'm a dog owner. I have no problem with the collar. Okay, it's got. I do not believe it's a data protection issue for me to have my number on it. And again, we're talking about there are not the problems with gangs in here as there are in the UK with dogs. I absolutely accept that. But do we have the problem with kidnapping dogs in Jersey as we do elsewhere? Suddenly we do. I have no problem with having a dog's name. You know what the dog name is. If you're looking after a dog, you call it by its name. With a telephone number and the licence, that makes complete sense to me. It makes it simpler, rather than putting your address down. So I would urge the committee to not accept the reference back. Let's move on and debate this piece of legislation, and then let's all do our job in this assembly, sir, which is to vote for it or vote against it, according to whether you think it's right or wrong. It's as simple as that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I'm also not in support of the reference back. And the reason is, and I very much appreciate the work and the points that have been raised in respect of scrutiny. I think, though, it's a bit like people, there are no perfect laws. And there is this point about if this law isn't passed in this form right now, that there's an opportunity that's going to be missed in terms of getting it in the statute books and actually understanding a bit more about a dangerous breed as it's described in the island. I do very much agree, though, in terms of points that have been raised by scrutiny that perhaps might have been part of the process in bringing forward this law. And a particular point that has troubled me has actually been from a data protection point of view, that one aspect that just still doesn't sit particularly easily with me has been a change that apparently has been prompted by data protection concerns, when it seems to be suggesting that either dogs have great data protection rights, that basically an owner doesn't tend to put their own name on a collar, but they do volunteer details in order to have dogs found. And that there is, I think, that ability to say, well, you don't have to put the address down. You could put down the dog licence. That's up to you, and that gives a bit more flexibility. It's not perfect. I also note that, and quite logically, that the Chief State's Veterinary Officer was consulted on this. And she said this thing, that there may be no definitive right answer. Dare I say, it's almost like online harms. There's so many different ways of cracking a nut. And that maybe the important thing is to do what we do in politics and go in the right direction. The statistics show that these ex-bullies, for example, do perpetrate more attacks. And therefore you have to question, why are people bringing them into the islands and these things? So maybe that is a point that may help people reflect. But there is this danger in terms of kind of the point when you can just question something to the point where you just don't get anywhere. And I noticed that I feel that this happened a bit earlier when we were talking about the inland, the harbour regulations, and that there's so much you could do about regulating boats, but it's a different culture. So anyway, the long and short of it is I don't support the reference back. I do believe that the State's Veterinary Officer, with her support, is something that gives me reason to support the law going forward.
Thank you, Deputy. I call upon the proposer to reply. Deputy Chair.
Thank you, sir. I start by disputing Deputy Liu saying that this is all about the dog laws and dog collars. I mean, as I said in my speech, the panel is content with amendments to amendments on this issue, and I am completely aware of the importance and need of the proposed registration and restrictions on dangerous dogs. I am not taking this lightly. I am frustrated as anyone else that this has not been a clean process, because this has been sloppy law making. To be clear, we never got told about the amendments related to all dog owners. That is just not acceptable. The amendments since the amendments made by the committee, since to their own amendments, shows they weren't well thought through, as they have been strongly amended or deleted by the committee. Deputy Gore says that good lawmaking is about talking it through and being appropriately considered. But the panel believes this did not happen. And this clearly did not happen because only last week, Thursday of last week, did the JSPCA send the scrutiny panel a letter that says that they had not been consulted, and they are one of the main stakeholders within this law. They are not the general public. They are very specific to this law. And also the police, last minute, I also saw police concerns that were sent to the committee, as well as I highlighted in my speech. And so I am just doing my job as scrutiny chair to call this out and to question a potentially weak law. Yes, this law will help designate dangerous dogs. But what then? What happens after? There is nothing and no teeth to enforce it, and this has never been brought up to scrutiny panel at all throughout the whole process. Scrutiny panel was not shown that there had been thought through after the seizure of dogs what will happen, and even though that potentially is in law and written in of the responsibilities of what will happen after the seizure of dogs, scrutiny never was told that at the moment this is not possible to do it, and therefore these are the mitigating circumstances to ensure that in the future we could do that. We were never told any of these situations. And I'm coming to Deputy Ward's point about, okay, well, why don't we just amend this? But amend what? The only way we could do is take out Article 11 about seizing and the facilities, and that's not what we want to do. It's very important to have the police who are protected and supported to be able to handle dangerous dogs. After all, these are dangerous dogs, and also facilities to put there. But we've heard from both the police and the JSPCA that they are unable to do this. But that won't help if us by amending anything. It's about what happens next, and we heard from Deputy Gorse to say, okay, well, that will happen through guidance. But we haven't been told about that. We do not know what that means and what is those steps that will help Jersey be able to enforce those dangerous dogs scenarios. That is what we're concerned about. And about the discussion about how much is consultation and how much has been consulted. And if we only received this letter last Thursday and the information from the police late last week as well, how would you, and I would say that to the States Assembly as a whole, receiving this information, think that there is a well thought out plan for implementing this law? And of course we wanted to talk with the committee to discuss how to do this. And of course they were notified last week that we potentially would be bringing this reference back so that they could come and answer those particular questions of concern that we had about implementation of the law. Not able to amend it, but the implementation of it effectively. And we heard from the Constable only today during his speech about potential roundtable. But that's only the beginning. That should have happened already. That should have happened ages ago to have gone, okay, we've got this situation coming, we've got this amendments to make. We will have to, when it's signed into force, and it will happen from the date it's signed off, what happens if the next day we have to seize a dangerous dog? What happens? We do not know what happens, even if that is just a thoughtful process at the moment. Scrutiny was never told, and we're concerned that maybe, and welcome that the Constable says that he will accept the reference back and take it back for 2 weeks' time. But I would like to question, would he be able to answer those questions and come with the evidence that those discussions have happened already, and that we know specifically what are the general outlines of what will happen after the point. And also, of course, that analysis around a dog-specific breed approach to designating dogs. As a scrutiny chair, I do not have an opinion on which way is the best. It would just be, I think, important to show within the report, when it was presented to the States Assembly, that those other ways have been thought through. That there is a reason, there is left with little doubt that the way that they have chosen to designate dogs is the right way. And that argument was not presented to us. It was presented as fait accompli, and we would like to see the underlying evidence around that. So I think this is more than dog collars. It took a turn with that, and I feel that that is a small part of this whole thing, which for us is about the concerns about sloppy lawmaking, and then afterwards being able to actually have efficient and effective law that we can actually implement in Jersey. Otherwise, it's just for the law books, but we can't actually do anything real if and when, and unfortunately, something happens with a dangerous dog.
Is the appel called for?
Yes, sir.
Members are invited to return to their seats. Voting on a reference back. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members with the chance of casting their votes, I ask the greffier to close the voting. Announce the reference back has been defeated, 19 votes pour, 22 votes contre, and 2 abstentions.
2 abstentions, please.
We have all of them, please, sir.
Yes.
Those members voting pour the Constable of St Peter, St Martin, St John, and Deputies Southern, Tadier, Morel, Alves, Mesic, Coles, Borre, War, Miles, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Rose Binet, Jearn, Hal, Kovac, and Stevenson. Those members voting contre, the Constable of St Helier, St Lawrence, Trinity, Grouville, St Juan, and St Saviour, and Deputies Luce, Doublé, Lehigera, Ayer, Rob Ward, Gorst, Banash, Scott, Miller, Berry, Alex Curtis, Barbara Ward, Andrews, Renouf, Bombinet, and the Constable of St Clement, and those members abstaining, the Constable of St Brelard and St Mary.
So we now return to the principles. Who wishes to speak on the principles? Yes, Deputy Ward.
Thank you, sir. The point I wanted to make earlier regards this is that it's always going to be a challenge to try and control any form of threat, real or perceived, in our society. And the threat of what are labelled dangerous dogs is real. I think the coverage of it publicly in our media is sometimes sensationalist, but it's not sensationalist for those people it directly affects. It's very real, and it's a very, very real concern. So I come from a position of that incredibly real concern for individuals, for those that might have been harmed. And I'm certain that's not the intention for that to happen. And I do feel for those breeds of dog that are classified in this way. But the reality is in our society is that they exist and there needs to be some form of control. I will mention, sir, if I can, the people who read from their laptops, sir, and I'm really not very good at it, but from the comments paper, if I may, that was published, it says the panel is broadly supportive of the aims of the proposition. In particular, it welcomes the introduction of new registration scheme for dangerous dogs, which is intended to strengthen public safety by ensuring that ownership of such dog is regulated, recorded and subject to clear conditions. The panel also supports the creation of new restrictions on dangerous dogs, including requirements for insurance, control in public places and neutering, which it understands are designed to reduce the risk posed to the public and animal welfare. I agree with that. I accept that. I think that's the right thing to do. And so therefore, I can be supportive of this. As I mentioned before, so I don't have a problem with collars. It's a bit of a pain. I have to replace a collar. But also, it means, although I don't have to replace a collar yet, however, being a responsible owner, sir, I will replace the collars because I want them to have, I think it's a good idea to have the registration number on and my phone number, because if my dog goes missing, I want to know where he's gone. Probably be wherever the latest food source is, I'd imagine, sir. It would be somebody's kitchen when they've opened a packet of ham, I'd imagine, because you'll be there without you even knowing, but there you go. Sorry, sir, I'd like to know. I will say, sir, that I would suggest one thing, and I would ask the committee to look at. There are around 10,000 dogs on the island, and I believe that the dog licence fee is going up to £20. That's an income of £200,000 if there are 10,000 dogs. £100,000 if it stays at £10. That's a significant amount of money, and I think that money should be pooled, let me suggest, because and I'm pleased to see the committee working together on this. I think that could be pooled in order to provide employment for dog wardens, call them what you will, who are not there just simply to be punitive, but as part of the process of information. So, for example, if there is a reactive dog, a dog warden can go to the owner and say, I see that you've got a reactive dog, you're doing the best that you can with them. Here's some advice, here's some trainers who could possibly help you, here's some other sources of information for you, and here's places you can go to help change that behaviour in your dog. It's proactive, it's supportive, and it's cooperative. Indeed, sir, if that was happening, I would happily pay £20 a year for my dog licence, because I know there would be more protection for my dog, who can sometimes, although he's not a small dog, so he's quite a big dog, is also not particularly good at protecting himself. He's a bit of a cowardly boy, but he's a big, soft, gentle boy. Okay, and he can at times face larger dogs that I know I'm worried about. So, sir, I can support this for the reasons in the comments paper, and I think it does reflect what's happening in that comments paper that the panel has produced. I think if we want to go down the line of vetting people, then fine, but that needs to be done separately. I think that is a separate piece of law. It might be a very good idea if you want to have this type of dog, but then so we go down the line of labelling types of dog. Unless you're going to say that every single dog owner on this island needs to be vetted for their appropriateness for owning a dog, may be a good idea. So I will say that my dog was a rescue dog, and before we had that dog, we were vetted by the rescue dog, Jersey rescue dogs, who were absolutely fabulous, quite rightly as well. And during that process of them visiting us, the dog coming to visit us and stay with us for a few hours and then a bit longer, they were checking us out, quite rightly, as to whether that was the right home for that dog. And I have no problem with that whatsoever, because I wanted to know if we were the right home for that dog, because we want to do our best by that dog who had a difficult time and has become the most important thing in my life, I think. So this is a challenging debate, because we are in the realms of saying we will label certain creatures as dangerous to our society. And I don't know whether that is entirely the right thing to do. However, I think we have to put caution first in this circumstance. I would like to see more support for dog owners across the island for the spend of their dog licence. I think that is something that could be explored. Quite happy to come and talk about that.
And apparently we're in court.
Is that good?
So could members please return from the tea room? We're court now. Yes, please continue.
I've finished anyway, sir, but I would say so that I think I can support this legislation at this stage, or the principles at this stage, for the reasons that I've given, and I support the first part of the comments paper from the scrutiny panel. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And it's strange when you completely agree with one of your colleagues that will come to a different conclusion at the end, because there is absolutely something about dogs being dangerous that needs to be controlled. So I remember when one of the first dogs I had in our family home, I was out walking her around Waynay, and all of a sudden there was a confrontation.
Sorry, we're still in court. if you please go to the tea room and ask the members to come into the chamber speedily.
Shows the human side to you.
Yes, please continue.
Thank you, sir. So as I was saying, sir, I was walking my dog around Waynay Common, and all of a sudden another dog attacked my dog quite viciously, with the owner nowhere in sight, because again the owner was nowhere in sight to be seen. Now, of course, this was an incident that involved a friendly black lab and a Doberman. But mine was the Doberman that got attacked by the black lab, because it proves that any dog can be dangerous. And so my issue, sir, with how this law is proposed is that it is only specifically targeting a single dog that will be registered as a dangerous dog and give its requirements under that law of what has to happen to it. There are other parts that change and adjust it about dogs which are dangerously out of control. However, sir, but if a dog is dangerous, has bad habits, or has been bred or reared in a way that means it has ill temperament, the chances are that if that dog is bred, it can pass those bad temperaments on to its offspring. Because this is the problem we're facing with the breeding in of XL bullies. These are not bred from soft, light, fluffy, friendly dogs if we're going to consider them dangerous. They are bred from dogs which have been bred from fighting dogs, because that's the breed type, that's where they've come from. That is the realistic point, that the XL bully has been bred from pit bulls. Pit bulls were named because they used to fight in pits, and that is the point. But actually, sir, any dog can be dangerous. This law should be incorporating the fact that if a dog has reacted in certain ways or is proven to be dangerous, that the same conditions should apply to that dog, that it should be legally required to be muzzled, it should not be bred from, and it should be neutered. But of course, this law doesn't do that. And the other problem that I still have is the fact that there's no issues and controls onto the owners. There needs to be more the restrictions about people who actually have dogs, because like I said, it's a registry. Don't get a dog license, it's a dog registry. Anybody can turn up with a tenner at the parish hall annually and say, I'm having a dog, and regardless whether they know how to deal with a dog, whether they've got conditions to have a dog. As Deputy Ward said, I also had a rescue dog. I used to live in a one-bedroom apartment. The JSPCA came round, did a number of inspections, looked where we lived, and they looked at our dog history, what experience we'd had with dogs, what our working hours were, to ensure that we knew that we couldn't leave any dog that they gave us for more than 4 hours, that it had good access to exercise, that we were active people to suit the type of breed we were looking for, or looking to rescue. So we were quite surprised when they agreed to give us a Springer Spaniel in that apartment, because anybody who's had a Spaniel knows they are energetic dogs, but also that they like to sleep. The good thing is, where we lived at the time, we didn't have to cross a road to get to the beach, so we knew we were appropriate dog owners. We had experiences like myself with having a Doberman as I grew up. My wife had a Border Collie, both dogs which required good experience. And I'll be honest, sir, in our early days when we first got those dogs, we probably shouldn't have had these dogs. I think Border Collies, like I say, they're really intelligent, but they're quite neurotic, and you need to understand the breed that you're having. I get concerned time and time again when I look on social media, sir, with people asking, oh, we're thinking of getting a dog. What breed would anybody recommend? I was like, well, sorry, sir, but people should be doing that research before they get a dog to understand whether not only is the breed suitable for them, but if they are suitable for that breed. And again, we had an opportunity within this dogs law to make that more of the point. So, Deputy Ward, there's been questions around whether the dog licence is increasing this time around. I don't actually believe that it is, and it will stay as £10. But as I've said to other people within our scrutiny panel, I would personally, as someone who likes dogs, who wants another dog in my life as soon as there's a big thing that's happening next year, so which will affect what my working hours might be. Once that is concluded, I'll know whether I'm in the position that I can actually have another dog or not. And once that is, so I've lost my train of thought slightly there. Once that's in place, I would support an increase in the dog licence if it meant there was a single point of contact for any dog-related issues on an island-wide basis. Because where I used to live in the parish of Grouville, there was a particular dog owned by a particular person who caused a lot of problems in the parish. So there was multiple calls made to the centennial. Words of advice were given to the owner, but not enough was done. But that dog should not have stayed with that owner, sir. That dog was in a case of neglect because it wasn't, but of course because it was fed, it was sheltered, it was seen as okay. But that dog was not exercised according for its needs, and that dog became aggressive towards other dogs. That owner continuously failed to keep that dog on the lead because he was in his 80s, sir, and this dog weighed 30 to 40 kilos and had been known to pull him over the sea wall. But of course, there was no powers were enacted to remove this dog from this person. So, sir, I think I'm not going to go as far as to say that I will vote against the principle, sir. I am likely to abstain, sir, because I do appreciate that these particular breeds of dogs have been bred for the wrong reasons. I just don't think that this law is going the right way about solving a problem for the future as well. It is only looking at this one specific thing, and I think there is a lot more that we should be doing, not only to protect children from dogs, but also to protect dogs from people, because the wrong people have dogs, sir, and that's where I'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. People often don't realise how much work States members do behind the scenes, and one of the things which I have worked a lot with, or been in quite a bit of communication with the Comité de Connétable, has been on the subject of dogs. And this came from me looking at the possibility of the restrictions on beaches being changed, and I invited members of the public to give me their views. And as a dog owner, I could see all the arguments for saying maybe they should be changed in the winter and during term time, all these sort of things. And I became aware that there were so many people in our community who have a fear of dogs and enjoyed walking on the beaches when there weren't dogs around. Some of them really did have a problem, had kind of children with issues with dogs and these things. And so it got me more focused on the way in which, as owners, dogs are controlled, and in you're just accepting, well, actually dogs, that just run up to people, that's not always welcome. How good are people in terms of addressing recall of their dogs? And that led to me having communications with the constables about the contents of the dog licence and the notices that might be given to educate people in training dogs, and indeed even in terms of a certain protocol in dogs. I mean, male dogs can be quite aggressive. They don't necessarily attack each other, but they can make a lot of growling, and even that can be interpreted by owners. Female dogs on heat can actually cause male dogs to go completely, AWOL and even fight over each other. So this need to be more aware that dogs can be dangerous creatures, even the ones that you don't associate with being a dangerous breed, and even that they can cause distress, is something that I do hope that the constables will continue thinking about. And I also have mentioned the doubling of the dog licence, ask questions about where the money goes and how this might be used in the education of dogs. Coming back to this proposition, I think the really important thing is that legislation is proportionate. We're a small island. And I'm going to bring back the attention to the comments of the scrutiny panel itself and the work that they did. And in particular, the comments showed that the police were spoken with and that they were supportive, generally supportive of the dangerous dog provisions. The state's veterinary officer acknowledged that the issue was contentious, but there may be no definitive right answer. I'm quoting from the report, by the way, but stated that based on the evidence currently available, the proposed approach was considered the most pragmatic means of reducing risk. So I do read into this that there has been thought given to the most practical way forward in this issue. Yes, there is some more work to be done. Yes, there's more discussions happening. For this reason, I do hope that, given the short time before dog licences are renewed again, that perhaps the scrutiny panel will think about not calling this in and just accepting that this is the most pragmatic solution going forward and can be worked with more. So I support the principles and hope others will too.
Thank you. Deputy Doublé.
Thank you, sir. I've got quite a few points I would like to make, and I'm trying to organise my thoughts, but I wanted to open by picking up on something the previous speaker said about the scrutiny comments. And I think that I watched part of the hearing that the scrutiny panel held, and I thought that the scrutiny has been very good on this legislation. And indeed, on scrutiny, we're very keen to be diligent and thorough. And I think, given the previous debate on the reference back, I do think it's worth us reflecting on the fact that several holes in the existing wider legislation that this amendment would be amending have been identified. And I would like to suggest that actually a review of that legislation is necessary. One point in particular that was raised by the panel around the seizure of XL bully dogs, where this amendment to be put into the legislation, and the Home Affairs Minister informed us during the reference back debate that the police would not be able to seize a dangerous XL bully dog. However, currently in the legislation, if a dog is identified as being dangerously out of control, the police should seize that dog. And I think it was the Environment Minister who mentioned that any dog could become dangerous. And indeed, the statistics reflect that. That there's quite a lot of information out there when you look for it, sir, which I have. And in the last 10 years, there have been 349. This was up to 2023, so it will have increased. 349 dog bites. None of those dogs were XL bully. And the question I would like to raise at this point actually is what is happening currently before this amendment to any other dogs that become dangerous? And some of those dogs might be much loved family pets that are at the complete surprise of their owners. For I think the minister mentioned that due to pain or other reasons a dog can become dangerous. I would really like to know what is happening currently and how that legislation is being enforced. So I do hope that the panel will follow this up, because this is possibly something that could go in a legacy report, the various points that have been raised by myself and other members that do need addressing, I think, in the wider legislation. And turning to that data, which was a result of an FOI, a previous speaker mentioned that it's not just children that we need to protect from dogs, it's dogs that we need to protect from humans. And indeed, dogs need to be protected from other dogs at times, because of those 349 dog bites, 197 were adults and children who were bitten, but 152 of those dog bites were dogs biting other dogs. So I know that there are a lot of concerned dog owners out there who do not feel that their perhaps timid or vulnerable dogs are being adequately protected. So we've spoken about children. I wanted to mention about vulnerable dogs as well. Something that was raised, I think it was Deputy Ward, mentioned, and I think it was a brilliant idea. I think he called it a dog warden. Yeah, and I listened with interest to his speech, and I think that's a fantastic idea. And some of the points raised by Deputy Scott about things that happen at the point of registering a dog, which of course this amendment does address some of those things that happen when you register your dog. I do think that that idea, again, if there is a scrutiny review into this area, whether it's in this term, probably not, maybe next term, or whether there's any further work by the Minister or the Committee, I think that idea should really be taken up, because I think it would help with a lot of these problems. It would help with perhaps the monitoring and the policing, it would help dog owners, it would help general members of the public, especially those with children, and just generally help us all to kind of have things to be a bit smoother when we're all using outdoor areas. And indeed, dog ownership has increased. Another document that I found, again, really useful, was something that the policy, I think it's the Policy Forum or the Policy Centre, they produce briefings. And there's one about dogs, which is really interesting. And I urge people to read it. And again, if there is a scrutiny review, to take that into account. But dog ownership has increased massively in some parishes, by around 30% in some parishes. And the reason why I mention this is I wanted to make the point now that is made very well in the CRIA, which accompanies this amendment. And my reason for not supporting the reference back centres around children's rights. That's my primary focus, certainly in this debate today. And we also, I think, several members received this email, but we had a submission or an email from a member of the public who is concerned about XL bully dogs and is also concerned more widely. And to quote from this member of the public, "I am concerned generally at the prolific increase in the number of out-of-control dogs on the island in recent years. Both myself and my young son have been confronted numerous times by vicious dogs off leads. My son is now very scared of dogs. In fact, many places, including the cliff paths and St Catherine's Woods, are now no-go areas for us." End quote. And I believe this is a fear that is quite common amongst children of the island, and I have concerns around it, and I wanted to put those concerns before members today. I don't know what the solution is. I think that some careful consideration of the issue is necessary, and again, I do think scrutiny have a part to play there. And I think that some thought needs to be given to how we can all coexist in a way that allows people to own dogs and to have those much-loved family pets that are very important to people, but to also, for people to be respectful of each other and particularly of the needs of children. And I'm thinking particularly of children perhaps with autism who can be quite afraid of dogs. And that fear can stop children actually accessing outdoor areas and from being able to play outside. So I will be supporting this amendment today, and I think my plea is that actually somebody, whether it's scrutiny, government, or the committee, looks at that wider legislation and takes on board some of the points raised today and does some work there, and particularly would really like to take that idea that Deputy Ward raised about dog wardens. I think that would help dog owners. I think it would be supportive for dog owners, and I think it would help those without dogs as well. I think it would be very good for our community and a great idea. So yes, I will be supporting today.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Andrews.
Thank you, sir. There's just a few questions that I have regarding several articles. Article 4D, review of decision to refuse or revoke licence. Obviously, the Conotab has a responsibility to refuse a licence or to potentially remove a licence should a dog, for instance, potentially attack another dog or potentially another a human being. But I think it's only right that there is an appeals process as well in both instances. And I see here, sir, that should there be an appeals process, there would be 3 Conotabs who would be sitting on a panel to adjudicate the appeal. And I was just wondering, sir, whether any consideration was given to other forms of adjudication for the appeals process, maybe to allow it to maybe be a bit more independent. Perhaps could it have been maybe deputies who could have maybe adjudicated on such matters, so it could potentially be a decision away from the Conotabs. And I'd just be interested to really know as to whether that was something that the Conotabs maybe deliberated upon before they then moved to bring forward this proposal forward. There's also a second part as well, and that's to do with a dangerous dog living in temporary accommodation. For instance, it might only be the case that they are living with somebody for a week or two because the owners are travelling overseas, or it could be the case that maybe if the owners are working and maybe say for 1 or 2 days throughout the year, somebody else is then looking after the dog. And I think because it's quite specific and obviously it's going to be imposed in law, such details will probably be very difficult to come by should this matter arise. And so I think there is probably a need to make sure that this information is known to the owners of such dangerous dogs. Because, of course, there is the potentiality of a 6-month sentence in prison if the dog owner is not abiding to those rules. And also there could be difficulties for whoever is looking after the dog as well. And also there could be implications for that individual too. But overall, I have to say, I think this is definitely something that has to be brought forward. You know, there have been articles in the past where children have been attacked, other dogs have been mauled. And I think something has to be done. There has to be a certain level of enforcement. And I know from my own personal perspective, I've got a Glen Mull, a very rare terrier. There's only about 3,000 worldwide. And one day I was walking into a pub in St Oban, and there was a bull terrier off the lead on the porch and had attacked my dog. And so I had no choice but to make the difficult decision, but to intervene. And I had no choice but to pick up the dog quickly. And I was struggling to hold that dog. It must have been about 25 kg. And the owner was intoxicated, heavily intoxicated, and he was stumbling a bit towards me. I thought, I don't really feel confident handing over your dog back to you when you're so drunk. And it happened in front of so many people. And I just remember being with a friend who thankfully rushed my dog away. And he was only about 5 months at the time. He was a puppy. And, you know, he's such a mellow and lovely dog, but of course I'm going to say that. But he was shaken up for about half an hour. And I thought, no, we can't stay here. We've got to take him home. It's not right. It's not right. And he's been okay, thankfully, ever since. But I was thinking afterwards, that could have been a small child. It's before 9 o'clock. You know, it's about 7 o'clock maybe. And so that could have been a 6 or 7-year-old, you know, walking along with mum and dad, being attacked by one of those dangerous dogs. And, you know, you do hear about it quite often, sir. But I think there's quite a lot of incidents that are probably not reported as well. So I think the true number of these incidents is probably a lot higher than the actual figures show. And I have to say, I'm also concerned as well when I sometimes come across some of these dogs on the beach. They're so powerful. And if they, you know, attack another dog or a person, there is no stopping the attack with some of these dogs. And they inflict so much damage as well. And that's the other thing. You know, everybody has a right, in my view, to be able to go into a public place and to feel safe. And I also get the fact that, yes, dogs also should have an element of liberty as well, but also I think for some dogs there has to be a certain element of constraint as well, because it's the harm that they pose to others in society. And so I think you have to be very careful at managing that. You've got to get your enforcement right, but you've also got to recognise as well that just because we are designating a status for certain breeds to be a dangerous dog, not all dogs are dangerous. But I think it's more about the risk they pose, and it's about ensuring that we are providing adequate protections to prohibit such incidents from happening. And I don't think you can say, look, nothing's going to happen, but I think you can minimise it, sir. And so I will be supporting the principles, but I would also be grateful if the proposer could just respond to my two queries about the respective two articles, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable of St Mary.
Sorry, thank you, sir. I suppose it was always the case that this debate would overflow from the specific aspect of dangerous dogs to the more general nature, and so it has proved. And my purpose in wishing to speak is to try and get us back on track to deal with the dangerous aspects and acknowledge that there are other aspects to be dealt with regarding dogs generally. In her litany of problems relating to the dogs law generally, the chair did refer to the fact that the quest of control of dogs was split between numerous amounts of legislation with no central focus on it. I had hoped that, given that I was aware that an amendment to dogs law was coming, that something would be included in it as to control of dogs. And whilst there is reference to dangerously out of control dogs, I had rather hoped it would go far beyond. My interest stems mainly from general concern, but only this week did I receive, or I met a parishioner who no longer takes her own dog for a walk on the north coast. The reason for this is that is a favourite area for professional dog walkers, and someone having a large number of dogs, quote, under their control, and she's concerned for the safety of her dog and others that they are not actually in control. She did refer, or maybe another parishioner referred to the fact that only recently there were cited 20 dogs under control of 3 professional dog walkers, and that is I suggest a major problem. I appreciate that professional dog walkers do have a place in life, but it does, with so many in their charge, it does create fear amongst dog owners, and it cannot be right that they are effectively prevented from going where they want, and that is an area I wish to see addressed. I have not overlooked the fact that there is a very helpful code of conduct issued by the Environmental Health Department on professional dog walkers, and it does contain the clause, this guidance relates only to transport, walking and exercise of dogs by those caring for them in a professional capacity. However, some aspects also apply to anyone walking a dog in a public place, and that is very valid. The point I wish to make, sir, is that is purely a guide, and I've seen nowhere in legislation an actual obligation to control dogs in a certain way, to limit the number of dogs under control, to require that they have professional indemnity insurance and such matters. I think I would say pushing into an open door with the chair of the committee. The committee understands my concerns. I think they are generally on side with that, and I think that having done most of the work already, I can't speak for the chair of my panel, but I think we may be well open to the idea of conducting a review and working collaboratively with the committee should they wish to take it further. The basic point I wish to make, sir, is that there is, as various members have mentioned, a dearth of legislation concerning control of dogs, which is control over the owners rather than dogs themselves, and which should be rectified. And I think if we could discipline ourselves to agreeing that this will be done as a separate matter, that might actually assist the consideration of the particular proposition we have before us as to dangerous dogs. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, John. Tadia.
So I made a lot of my comments in the reference back speech, so I won't repeat those, sir, but I'll focus on a number of issues that have been touched upon. The first is this idea of a dog warden. I know it's not central to this proposition, but I think it is ancillary and adjacent to it. I go back to 2011, actually, so 14 years ago, I was on a scrutiny panel under Deputy Lahorisier at the time, and one of the recommendations we made was that the Minister of Home Affairs should work with the police and the parishes to establish a dog warden role, as used by other authorities to act as a point of contact for members of the public should they want to report an incident. But the wider benefit of that dog warden role would, I think, as other members have suggested, Deputy Ward has suggested as well, that it could be a wider, more proactive role. So that person, indeed it might be more than one in an island our size with the levels of dog ownership, to be able to give words of advice, but perhaps also to issue on-the-spot fines for certain misdemeanours that have up to date never ever been enforced. And we think, of course, on the one hand of littering. I don't think anyone in Jersey has ever been prosecuted for littering. Nobody's ever been prosecuted for dog fouling, even though those are offences which are largely annoyances but do have health issues. Of course, when it comes to this proposition in front of us, they could also have a key role in that. So 14 years is never too late to dust off an old scrutiny report and perhaps to stick it in a manifesto if one were minded to perhaps run for Constable of St Helier. It's something that may well be popular and certainly could be afforded from the many thousands who own dogs in the parish. There were at least 2 occasions where I've been bitten by a dog, sir, and before I proceed, can I just ask, sir, do you understand the meaning of the word chew in Gérier, sir?
Well, if it's rude, don't use it.
I won't use it, sir.
If it's polite, then you can.
I won't use it, sir, but that's where I was bitten.
Oh, right. I think you may have just used it. Could be wrong.
So I'll leave it to the imagination. And there, on both occasions, one was when I was young and I had a paper round on Petit Brut de Miel, for Machons, in fact. And there were 2 large, I think I'm going to call them Weimarers. They were tall dogs who lived, and I can still remember the exact house. And I got bitten, I will say it now, on my rump, sir, in English. And I went back home later to my mum and told her what happened, and she was so indignant that she paraded me, she didn't phone the police or anything like that, she paraded me in her French fashion, desiring, I suppose, some immediate retribution, to the person's house who owned the dogs, and then proceeded to show them where I'd been bitten, which was probably more of a punishment for me than it was for the owner of the house. And then the second occasion was when I was a bit older, and I think I was due to be playing some music, and I turned up on my scooter, on my motorbike, and the 2 big dogs that they had in the yard were, I forget the name of them, the big fluffy types, they look a bit like, I think Newfoundlands they were, 2 Newfoundlands, lovely dogs, beautiful dogs, very friendly. And I went in with no problem, but then when I came back out to move my motorbike, I think the motorbike spooked one of them, and again it bit me in exactly the same place. That time I didn't show it to my mum, because I didn't want a repeat of what had happened maybe some 20 years earlier. The long and the short of that is, what was the consequence of that? If I'd have reported that to the police, that would have, of course, been recorded as a bite. I didn't really want anything to happen for that. I think because I was circumspect, I probably made sure that I had my tetanus jabs and that they were up to date. But I certainly wasn't going to be asking for those 2 dogs to be destroyed. I completely understood, certainly in the latter case, the psychology of what had happened with that dog, and I put it down to experience. But of course, I should have probably, even in that latter case, notified the owner to let him or her know what was going on. That is in no way, sir, to undermine the more serious attacks that do happen in the island for people who do get bitten or even, I would say, savaged by dogs. And of course, that is the purpose of this law. But what I would like to see ultimately in this law is much more focus, as I've suggested earlier, on the owners of the dogs rather than on the dogs themselves as being the problem. It has quite correctly been said that what we're talking about here are wild animals, albeit wild animals that have been tamed and selectively bred, largely for domestication purposes and nowadays to be kept as pets, but which can, of course, at some times display erratic behaviour. On the other hand, of course, I can vouch from experience that dogs can be incredibly empathetic. So even only last week, when we were visiting some family with our dog, and the dogs are related as well, they're brothers, so my sister-in-law and brother-in-law have one dog, we have the other, and the fireworks were going off, and the brother dog became particularly agitated during the fireworks and let out this a muted howl, I can only call it, which was certainly very pained and distressed, which our dog doesn't do. He's a bit more relaxed around fireworks. And immediately our dog got up, crossed over the room and went to see if the dog was all right, his brother was okay, and started licking him and started to try and reassure him. He'd never experienced, he recognised that there was some distress there. So we are not just dealing with wild animals, we are actually dealing with dogs who have got a wide capability for emotion and empathy as well. And so I would like to see the punishments and penalties as well as the preemptive conditions in what we're proposing to look at the owners. So to the point where I think if somebody's dog, a dog is out of control and it, especially in an unprovoked way, causes damage either to livestock or indeed to another dog or to a human being, and let's focus on that latter, I would like to see the owner of that dog treated in the same way as if they perhaps had caused the injury themselves. So if you haven't got a dog under control and your dog has caused serious bodily damage to another human being, then it could well be that that owner of the dog should be up for GBH, ABH or assault rather than the dog itself. Because of course the dog is only able to do what the owner allows it to do. And that, if, of course, in the worst case scenario where somebody is killed by a dog, then I think it should be open within the law. I'm not sure if I'm speaking naively here, if it is possible already, but I don't think it is for that person to actually be tried with manslaughter or whatever equivalents. And I think if those provisions were put into the law and owners of dogs realise that actually, especially if they're deliberately seeking to choose a dangerous type of dog, and a dog which they actually decide to make and keep in a dangerous fashion, that they should be not only responsible for it, but they should be subject to the consequences of it if in these extreme circumstances. There are those, for example, who say that if boy racers and possibly girl racers are caught to be doing excessive speed, that the car should be destroyed. I've always found that a slightly illogical position. Why would you scrap a perfectly good car just because somebody is using it irresponsibly? And a car isn't the same as a dog, of course, but I can't help feeling that in circumstances where even in extreme a dog has bitten another dog, that there should be a suggestion that the dog should be destroyed automatically without looking at the owner of the dog, sir. So those are my comments. I do welcome further scrutiny from the scrutiny panel if they're going to call this in. I would suggest actually that I don't think that the public have fully had their say on this matter. I think we do tend to live in a bubble and we might prepare for these debates in a way, but the public often only start to think about these issues when they're on the front page of the local paper, and that's often after the fact has been debated and the decisions have been made. And I think if the scrutiny panel had the bandwidth and were minded to do a number of road shows, maybe one in the west, I think I'd certainly welcome them in St Brelard, one in St Helier and one in the country parishes, that they would have no shortage of dog owners, interested parties with some great ideas, because I think we all want the same thing. We want a proportionate Jersey, proportionate law in place which protects the vulnerable, protects children, protects humans from the worst excesses of dangerous dogs, but also actually seeks to resolve the problem at source, so that dangerous dogs should be discouraged, and that those who would be likely to own dogs for nefarious purposes are actually prevented from doing so in the first place. If we can stop the root causes of many of these potential attacks, then I think that's what we should be best doing.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Renouf.
Thank you, sir. Listening to this debate, I note that members are raising a number of problems with issues that aren't tackled by the legislation. You know, that there are issues with owners more than there are with dogs. There's several problems still not being tackled by this proposition, and all of those seem to me to be entirely legitimate issues. But I do think they're missing the point of the proposition. For me, it is primarily about stopping a problem getting worse. It's not primarily aimed at solving existing problems with dogs that may be out of control and so on. That does, as people have referenced, require a bigger piece of work. However, if we do not take action, we would be adding to the issues with dangerous dogs that may already be in place, but that may already exist by not putting in place controls on breeds that are potentially lethal, that may start to come into the island in greater numbers. So if we pass this proposition, we will be making it much harder to bring those breeds into the island, to breed them and to exchange them. And that, it seems to me, is good. And therefore, I would say a corollary of that is I do support a breed-specific approach. Yes, we should be doing more in all sorts of ways to protect people from dogs, and indeed, as Deputy Coles says, dogs from people, and dogs from dogs, as Deputy Doublé said. But we have before us a proposition, and the question is, does it help? And it's precisely because dogs can't be responsible for their actions that the simplest and easiest way to control their behaviour, if you like, their ownership, is their ownership and presence in the island. A dog that, when it's attacked, is much more likely to be lethal, is more in need of control than a much smaller breed. And that is why I do favour a breed-specific approach. And it is why trying to cut this problem off at source by limiting as much as possible the import and circulation of potentially very dangerous breeds will help the problem with dangerous dogs getting worse, stop the problem with dangerous dogs getting worse. It gives greater regulatory control, and I place strong weight on the words of the Chief Vet in that regard, in support of this legislation. So for me, the island will be a safer place without the breeds mentioned in this legislation, and this proposition gets us into a much better place in being able to achieve that aim. I do think the process of getting to this point has not been great. It feels like it's been sloppy. The chair of the scrutiny panel's comments in this regard are very well made. However, in the end, the proposition is about lessening risk. It's not perfect. There are still gaps, but I think on the basis that it does reduce risk, I support it.
Thank you, Deputy. Constable Greville.
Of course, I'm sure most members would realise what I used to do for a living and how we put ourselves at risk on a daily basis out on a postal delivery. My colleague behind me, I'm sure, will back me up. However, there were some very serious incidents over those 23 years. I was bitten twice, sir. Once by a neurotic border collie, already mentioned by Deputy Coles. A collie, unfortunately, that was so neurotic it had to be restrained, and unfortunately got out that day, but that wasn't my fault. The second incident was, unbelievably, with a Chihuahua. A lapdog indeed, but that Chihuahua had a very bad day, very bad tempered that morning. I knew the dog well, as most postmen know most dogs. But nevertheless, it drew blood and I had to go and get a tetanus injection. Ridiculous, I know. But two of my colleagues, one of them had to retire early as a direct result of a dog injury. The other had 38 stitches in his chest and nearly died because of blood loss. So this cannot be underestimated. However, statistically, sir, if you think about 120 delivery officers going out on duty 6 days a week, it's a relatively minor incidence, if you would say, statistically. The CWU issued directives about breeds to watch out for. Statistically, a German Shepherd is the most dangerous. The second most dangerous, Jack Russell, which is no surprise to anyone. But third on that list, quite unusually, was a Labrador. Now, that's only because there are a lot more Labradors in the country. So the statistics are slightly skewed. But that's what I'm actually wanting to talk about in this respect, is that statistically, there are 22 of these dangerous dogs in the island, 4 of them of breeding age. If those 4 dogs all had litters of 4 puppies, the numbers of this particular breed would go up by nearly 60% in the island. So that is a genuine concern for everyone. Not least of all, actually, strangely enough, I believe that some of these dogs have actually turned on their own members of their own family. And of course, those dogs wouldn't have a muzzle in their own house. But one thing I would like the chair of the Committee de Connétable also to respond to, sir, if I may, is that some breeds are not able to wear collars. My brother's Podenco, for example, Whippets, Greyhounds, and whether he would consider adding the word harness into that, where the label of that dog is in particular, because some dogs literally can get out of their collars very quickly and easily. But this is a genuine fear that if we increase this amount of dogs in the island with these capabilities by 60%, that means that the chance of a serious incident goes up by the same amount. We must legislate for this breed and control them, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Connétable. Deputy Miller.
Thank you, sir. The Constable has in fact taken half of my speech, I think, because I was going to comment on the fact that all dogs can be dangerous in the right or wrong circumstances. One morning when I was Viscount, I was told by one of my senior officers that one of the enforcement officers had been bitten by a dog the previous evening. And I was very concerned, as any good employer would be, about workplace well-being, so I went down to see him. And I realised immediately on entering the office that there was very little sympathy on display from his colleagues. And when I stopped to ask what had happened and how was he, it transpired that he had indeed been bitten by a chihuahua, which had jumped up and bit his knee, and it had drawn blood, so he had had the appropriate treatment and all was well, but it caused a huge amount of amusement for the day. And it also has reminded me this morning that when I was campaigning last year, someone offered to come with me, doing a bit of door knocking in St Lawrence. This person shall remain nameless, but was a former senator and I believe Treasury Minister in his day. And we went into the house. We went into the house, and a little Jack Russell jumped up and bit him on the arm, so which I was mortified about. So, but all dogs do have capacity to be dangerous. But I will be supporting this legislation, despite all the imperfections and challenges that people have already raised. I am a dog lover, there's no doubt about that, but I'm also quite frightened of dogs. I was very frightened of them as a child, and if even a very small dog ran towards me now, barking and baring its teeth, I would be scared, because it is a scary thing. And I think we just have to remember that there is so much more we could do. I mean, as a dog lover, I think the issue of dangerous dogs could be vastly improved if we allowed dogs on beaches in the summer. Dogs are more risky when they're not exercised and they're restrained, and we take them from the beaches and stick them on the north coast. Well, as opposed to having vast expanses of beach in St Helier which have nobody on them at all. So I do think that is something we could look. There's lots we could do. The issue of human behaviour is also something that we need to think about, because people do some peculiar things, and there are people who want that type of dog. They want a dangerous dog for reasons understood only by themselves. And I'll just take that one step further in terms of what people do. A few years ago, I was in Canada skiing, and as I walked through the village, I saw a group of people clustered round a relatively young couple, and they were all looking at something on the floor. So being inherently nosy, I went to have a look and found that what they had was a big canvas thing, and they had 4 or 5 puppies that they were selling on the street. And these puppies were the most beautiful animals, absolutely stunningly beautiful animals. They were all cute and fluffy and white and grey and blue-eyed. They were absolutely adorable. And they were selling these animals, puppies, for £2,000. And I started off thinking they were huskies, some type of husky type dog. And as I listened, it became clear from the person selling that they were not dogs, they were wolves. They were part Arctic wolf and part timber wolf, and they had one as a pet. They had 2 as pets, and they were breeding them and selling the puppies. And they had quite an interested crowd round them. And you just think, well, that's amazing. I can't take one back to Jersey anyway. But when I got back to my hotel, the chap was there speaking to somebody who worked in the hotel. And then when he went off, the hotel worker said to me, yes, there are people in Canada are buying wolf puppies as pets because they think it's a great idea and because they look so beautiful when they're puppies. But you have to be in control constantly. You have to be the alpha, and the minute you stop being the alpha, you have literally got a wild animal in your living room. Now, that's not going to happen in Jersey, but we do have to think about human behaviour, and there will always be people who have dogs who can't really control them, and that is dealt with more by education and guidance, and by having a framework to deal with instances where things go badly wrong. So I will be supporting this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Does anyone else want to speak on the principles? I call upon the Chair to reply.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to restrict myself to speaking to those who've spoken to the debate rather than the reference back. I think it's there are lots of points brought up by members, and I'm grateful for those. Truthfully, I think Deputy Cole spoke of the identity of dangerous dogs and measurements, and I think it's fair to say, sir, that the State's vet will be communicating the measurement issue to those owners of who we know to be owners of dangerous dogs at the moment, and there will be parameters, especially when you get to crossbreeds, and there needs to be some identification, some parameters to which we will work. I'm also aware of, through conversations earlier, and obviously with the police, about the situation that the police find themselves in. And one of the perils, sir, of cost cutting in government all round is that the police have lost the dog handling unit. Now, we might think that, yes, that has achieved savings, but has it been a detrimental move for the island in general? And maybe it's something the Minister will be considering, and I think we will need to work collaboratively to ensure that the issue is covered in the short term. The Deputy Morel once again referred to bad legislation and the Dangerous Dog Act of 1991, and I did comment when I read the letter from the State's Veterinary Office that there is generally a lack of support by charities for the Dangerous Dog Acts, but it's perhaps not as soundly founded as might be felt on the surface. The Minister for Home Affairs did mention that it would be difficult to make any changes within the next 6 months, and there will obviously need to be provision made in terms of training and kennelling. And once again, sir, between ourselves and the police, this is something clearly we need to do. I would like to think, sir, that the needs for it will be very minimal, provided the legislation is accepted, because principally we won't be getting dangerous dogs coming into the island. We will have to deal with the ones that are already here. There is no particular evidence of those already here being a problem, but there is a risk. And if we can minimise the risk by agreeing with this legislation, that has to be helpful for all parties. I think, sir, that Deputy Scott mentioned the data protection issue on collars. It is part of the reason for changing the inscriptions on or engravings on a collar, not entirely, sir. And in fact, I'm grateful to the Chief Minister who highlighted the issue when the initial amendment came forward, and that has been changed to just incorporate the registration number, which of course has all the details that are required on it, and that will be backed up by an owner's, by the dog's name and telephone number. The Deputy Jeune felt that the amendments weren't communicated. I think they were, I feel they were communicated by virtue of the Comité issuing an amendment to the amendment, if you can call it that. So that was as a result of conversations we had with the scrutiny panel, and I'm grateful for their input in that. In terms of the weakness of the law to which he alluded, I think it's something that we do need to work on, and I think from any members who have been involved with the Honorary Police or sent in years, it's sometimes a difficult thing to charge. And I would urge any members of the public who have a dog attacked by another dog to report it straight away. 2 weeks after the event is no good, quite bluntly, and it's difficult to get the evidence, but a prompt reporting of any issues enables the police to deal with it far more effectively. It has to be thought through the actual charging process. We have laws in place. We have to give the police the teeth to be able to take it to press charges at a magistrate's court and take action. The magistrate can take action thereafter. Yes, we need to think through a good plan for mitigation, and I'm fully committed to doing that. I'm hoping once again that there won't be much in the way of need, and therefore not much in the way of the need for resource to deal with it, but we have to be prepared. Deputy Ward, sir, mentioned concern for individuals, and I'm pleased that he's supportive of the legislation. He mentioned fees. Fees are not £20. They're only £20 if people are late paying. It's normally 10. And I think the concept of a dog warden is something that we could follow up. It might be through the Honorary Police. It might be through an enthusiast within the parishes generally. We shall, I think, I certainly commit to looking further into that. There was once again the question of the right home for the dog, and I think that is exceedingly important. And I think the dogs that have caused problems in the past are certainly not in the right home, or possibly without the right, with the wrong owners. Going back to Deputy Colser and the need to control dangerous dogs, I think he's conflating the dangerous dogs with dogs out of control, which is very easy to do so. And that's a piece of an area of legislation which we have to deal with. And there is certainly a hole in the law in that respect. And we need to apply ourselves as to how we can deal with that and take that through legislation to enable suitable, give the police suitable tools to deal with it should the need arise. And I'm well aware, sir, that certainly in my parish there is a current live case where that is being dealt with, and the police do have concerns as to which piece of legislation they should use. There are this issue, as Deputy Coles also mentioned, about dogs being neglected and they become aggressive. He's absolutely right. And it's once again down to the owners and behaviour of the owners, which can often manifest itself with the dog. Deputy Scott mentioned beach restrictions in the summer and winter. This is an area of debate which often comes to this chamber, and I'm sure it will do once again. There are different sides to this argument, and maybe it's a question of whether we use or should we say allow different beaches to be used in the summer and restrict others is something I think this chamber will have to debate. In terms of recall, that is sometimes a challenge. She mentioned training for recall, and I think that is probably easier with some breeds than others. Retrievers are probably trained to recall, or it's inbred, be recalled, and certainly I think we can actually put out guidelines with the usual dog license issues or on parish websites, and I think that's always something we've got to keep on doing. Female dogs on heat is a problem for those that have had a bitch, and I think most people with a dog on heat will tend to be quite protective, because if it's a pedigree dog, they don't really want it, should we say, have it sort of, its pedigree, nature changed in its litters. Deputy Doublé mentioned once again several holes in legislation. She's not wrong. And I think that with a multitude of different dogs laws, there needs to be some consideration as how they can be amalgamated. She mentioned seizures. A seizure actually is the taking of a stray dog in terms of definition. The police won't, tend to be referred to the duty centennial, and as I mentioned earlier in the debate, the committee have an arrangement with the JSPCA who will receive seized dogs or stray dogs. Some of them, of course, won't have their collars, which is refers to the point made by Constable Labbe. Some will slip their collars, which makes identification a bit of a challenge. But the poodle system, as we call it, which is the name of the dog licensing system, does enable us to do searches on the various breeds of dogs about which we'll know. Deputy Doublé did support the dog warden concept, which I suggested I'm happy to follow up. The dog ownership has increased, yes, and I think it's probably as a result of COVID. People got a dog to keep them, should we say, amused is not the wrong word, or as part of company during the COVID period when they were locked in, and I think the numbers have been maintained. With regard to Deputy Andrews, he mentioned Article 4 and the ability to revoke a licence. Yes, there is an arrangement whereby 3 constables can adjudicate should, on an appeal. He suggested it might be more independent, but Article 4E does take it back to the Court of Appeals. There is a backstop on that should someone be dissatisfied. In terms of a dog living in different accommodation, it does come down to whoever is in control of the dog at the time. And clearly, his situation where a dog under the control, in theory, of an intoxicated owner, whilst being unfortunate, should have been sent to the police or reported to the police. Because one doesn't know if these things are happening regularly or whether it's a one-off occasion, because it's clearly an unsatisfactory state of affairs. So the Constable of St Mary's mentioned the overflow of the debate from dangerous dogs to dogs out of control, and I'm empathetic with his proposals that dog walkers need to be managed, and it's an area that we will be getting into dealing with, sir, so that there are some teeth for the police to be able to use should the dog walkers be out of control. And there are situations where a dog walker will be walking 10 or 11 dogs, and this is a situation where they're clearly not under control. The Deputy Tadia mentioned dog wardens once again. He also mentioned a scrutiny report from 14 years ago, so we'll need to look into that, and I hope that his rump has made a satisfactory recovery, sir. So I think, and he mentioned fireworks. Fireworks is always an issue and is reported every November the 5th as to the effect on pets, and I am probably in support of the point he makes, and that it is upsetting for not only dogs but other pets and horses, particularly in the island. I appreciate Deputy Renniff's comments, and he hit the nail on the head. He said it's stopping a situation getting worse with greater regulatory control, and the island will be a safer place as a result. It reduces risk, and those are the succinct points which are very pertinent. And once again, the Council of Greville will attest to the risks faced by postmen, and I think it's very unfortunate. One hears this tale time and time again. Of course, I suppose the dogs are protecting their domain into which the postman is walking, and I'm sure that Jersey Post will be training their postmen accordingly as to where they can and can't go. I thank Deputy Miller for her comments regarding electioneering particularly, and those of us who've been around knocking on doors will, I'm sure, appreciate that fearsome creature hiding behind the door. You don't quite see it, but you know there's something waiting to launch into you. And one hears the election material being chewed up as it goes through the letterbox. So, sir, that is my response to the principles, and I would move on to propose the articles.
You want to do the appel first?
Oh, yes, I ought to, sir. Thank you, sir. I'll therefore ask for the appel. And,
Would the Constable give way briefly for a point of clarification? I just want, it might be a clarification relating to my own speech. The Constable mentioned that the seizure of dogs in the law only relates to stray dogs, but is the Constable aware, or sorry, the Chair of the Committee aware of the Articles 10 and 11, which deal with the seizure of dogs which are dangerously out of control, which was one of the areas that I believe needs to be reviewed?
Yes, I thank the Deputy. So she's right. It's an area that needs to be dealt with at the moment. It's the definition of the out-of-control dog needs to be satisfied before it can be seized. But the advice I've received is a seizure is a dog which is wandering around, if you like, or lost, and that's what's coming back. But I think in terms of Article 11, which he mentioned, that is in the new law, and I'll just refresh my memory on that, is that it is effectively inserted in the new law that we're moving from seizure of lost dogs to a more formal approach. Does that satisfy your question?
This amendment, can I clarify, or could the Chair clarify that this amendment doesn't change the definition of a dog that is dangerously out of control as it's stated in the law? And a dog that is dangerously out of control is causing or has caused death, injury or harm to an individual, a domestic animal or livestock, or its behaviour is giving rise to alarm or apprehension on the part of an individual for the individual's own safety, the safety of another individual, or the safety of a domestic animal or livestock, and that alarm or apprehension is in all circumstances reasonable. And where those definitions, one of those is satisfied, the police may seize the dog that reaches those criteria. I don't think the amendment is changing any of that. Could you clarify?
That's absolutely correct, sir. No, the legislation isn't changing that process at all.
The appel has been called for. Members are invited to return to their seats. I ask the greffier to open the voting. All members have the chance of casting their votes. I ask the greffier to close the voting. The principles have been adopted. 42 votes pour, no votes contre, and 2 abstentions.
Those members abstaining, Deputies Tadier and Coles.
Deputy Joan, does your panel wish to scrutinise this matter?
Yes, sir.
And upon which date do you wish the matter to return? It must be set today and no more than 4 meetings' time.
Though I will say 4 sittings' time, I really hope that we will do this much quicker, given that the Conotub had already agreed that when we sent it back in the last debate, and so hopefully we can work with the committee quickly, but I would like it to be noted as 4 sittings.
The date set is February the 3rd. The next item is P68, Commercial Properties and Leases, Improved Administration, lodged by Deputy Miles. Main respondent is the Minister for Economic Development. There's been some amendments lodged. There's an amendment lodged by you, Minister, and there's an amendment to that amendment by the committee. Do you accept the committee's amendment or not?
No, sir.
You don't. All right. In that case, there'll be separate debates. It's probably appropriate for members with an interest in the operation owners or operators of commercial premises to declare an interest, understanding Order 106, if there are members with such interest. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I own a commercial premises and operate from commercial premises as well.
Thank you.
I'll second that, sir.
Constable of St Brelard.
Thank you, sir. Likewise, I own premises and operate a business from it.
Deputy Ward. Do you want to declare interest?
Yes, sir. We operate from Halker Place in town.
Deputy Jean.
Yes, I'd like to declare one small place in David Place.
Thank you. Deputy Rose Binet.
I'm an owner of commercial premises, sir.
Deputy Kovac.
Is it for renting premises as well? Because we also rent as a business.
Yes, I think for these purposes, yes. Thank you. Any other declarations, Deputy Coles?
Yes, it would be appropriate that my wife also rents commercial premises.
Yes. All persons who have declared interest may nonetheless take part and vote in this debate, as the interest is widely shared. Deputy Porre.
Yes, I would like to declare that I rent a business premises as well.
Thank you very much. And Tom Binet online. Deputy Tom Binet.
I'm an owner of commercial premises as well, sir.
Thank you very much. I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion, A, that a mechanism should be introduced to discourage commercial properties from being left vacant for extensive periods, and to request the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development to present to the Assembly an options paper identifying potential mechanisms, including fiscal mechanisms, before the end of March 2026. B, to request the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, in consultation with the Council of Ministers, to undertake a review of the structure of commercial leases in the island, identifying areas of concern and providing recommendations for the implementation of improvements, including, but not limited to, minimum standards of repair, responsibility for maintenance, a standard template for a commercial lease, and a set of best practice principles for commercial landlords, and to report such recommendations back to the Assembly before the end of March 2026. And C, further to the adoption of P93 2020, to request the Council of Ministers to proceed with the creation of a digital register of all commercial properties in the island that contains details of the ultimate beneficial ownership of those properties for the purposes of aiding policy formation, reducing vacancy rates, and if necessary for the regulation of the commercial property market.
Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. Members will remember that I lodged this proposition alongside P67, Le Kennevet Parade and Precinct, which was adopted by the Assembly at the last sitting. And when I lodged the proposition, my intention was simple: to shine a light on long-standing inefficiencies and challenges in the management of Jersey's commercial property market. Issues which, because they've been left unchecked, have undermined the vibrancy of our local communities and the success of our small businesses. And my intention there hasn't changed. And I, in fact, deferred the proposition to allow the lodging of an amendment. And I would like to say at this point, sir, that I am going to accept the COM amendment. Yes. But due to the extra amendment, it isn't possible to combine my amended speech into a single speech. So I have separated the two, and I apologise in advance if it appears a little bit fragmented. So we have a problem with vacant and neglected commercial properties, and as I outlined in P67, in St Brelard at Le Kennevet Parade and Precinct, we are witnessing what happens when commercial units are left empty for years on end. Where these units were once local hubs, places where people shopped, met and supported one another. Today, many are shuttered, neglected, and invariably unlettable. The paint is peeling, windows are dirty, and the area looks tired and unloved. And as I reiterated at the last sitting, this is not the fault of the residents or the small business owners. It is the consequence of inaction by shop owners who appear to have little or no interest in whether these units thrive or rot. Those owners are based off island, detached from the real impact of their neglect on Jersey, and we have no mechanism to intervene. And yet these properties sit within our parishes. They affect our communities, our economy, and our sense of pride in place. So their decline isn't a private matter, it is of public concern. And I don't think that is a standard that we should be accepting for Jersey. So the first part of the proposition proposes the introduction of a mechanism to discourage vacancies. Now, this isn't about being heavy-handed, it's about being proactive. And the proposition doesn't prescribe the solution, it invites thoughtful, evidence-based policy making. Incentives may well form part of that answer. Incentives to bring properties back into use, to encourage refurbishment, and to reward landlords who invest in their premises and their communities. But equally, we shouldn't shy away from the conversation about fiscal mechanisms, because if we are to discourage neglect, there must also be consequences for deliberate or willful inaction. And this ensures that we can explore the full range of options to discourage long-term neglect without rushing into measures that could have unintended consequences. And importantly, these measures should not only apply to private landlords. The states of Jersey too must lead by example. If we own commercial properties that sit empty for long periods, then we are part of the problem, and we must hold ourselves to the same standard as we expect of others. So the second part of this proposition, Sir, Part B, addresses the fairness and clarity of commercial leases, an area that has been crying out for reform for a very long time. We have not long ago debated and updated our residential tenancy provisions, but in Jersey we have no commercial tenancy legislation or guidelines. At present, commercial owners in Jersey are under no statutory duty to maintain or repair their properties, and this lack of basic protection leaves too many small businesses at the mercy of outdated, one-sided lease agreements. And I've heard the stories and seen for myself the shocking state of some properties, particularly those in Kennervay Precinct. Repairs left undone, leading to unsafe or unsightly premises, complex full repairing and insuring leases that place disproportionate burdens on tenants, the hidden costs in service charges and insurance clauses, long delays in responding to maintenance issues, and a lack of basic transparency around obligations and rights. Small businesses often struggle under these conditions, as most cannot afford legal specialists or court expenses, and the result, many simply walk away and another shop goes vacant. And I think we need to do better. We need to help our entrepreneurs. We want to retain our young people who want to start their own businesses, and a 9-year full insuring, full repairing lease is not the way to do that. So I'm seeking a system that gives commercial tenants basic protection, sets clear standards for property maintenance, and introduces a standardised template for leases to reduce ambiguity and dispute. I don't think these measures are particularly radical, they're fair, and they would bring Jersey into line with modern best practice. They promote mutual respect between landlord and tenant, and they will strengthen the commercial fabric of our island. In respect of Part C, Sir, my proposal calls for the creation of a digital register of commercial properties, and that was a proposal that was brought forward by Deputy Higgins in 2020, and that proposal was approved by this Assembly, but despite being adopted, it has never been fully implemented. And for the purpose of this proposition, I am referring only to the commercial element of that. I address the features in my report, but currently government has no clear record who owns commercial property. And as a result, this lacks the data to manage commercial property markets effectively. So, Sir, finally, this proposition isn't about ideology, it's about practicality and fairness. It asks that we take a long, hard look at how our commercial property market operates, and that we take steps, careful, consultative, but constructive steps to make it work better for everybody. And if we're serious about our economy, about supporting our small businesses, and about strengthening our communities, then we mustn't let the status quo continue unchallenged. And for those reasons, I'm pleased to make the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. There is an amendment lodged by the Minister for Economic Development, and I ask the Greffier to read the amendment.
Page 2, paragraph A. For the word introduced, substitute the words explored as part of the delivery of the retail roadmap. For For the words, to present to the Assembly an options paper identifying mechanisms, including fiscal mechanisms, substitute the words, to work with the Comité des Connétables and update the Assembly on this work. Delete the word March. Page 2, paragraph B, for the words, providing recommendations for the implementation of improvements, including but not limited to, substitute the words, provide information for landlords and tenants on best practice in relation to, and delete the word March. Page 2, paragraph C, for the words, the creation of a digital, substitute the words, an assessment of the Jersey land and property indexes. For the words, that contains details of the ultimate beneficial ownership of those properties, substitute the words, including retail properties, to identify areas of acute retail vacancy, and after the words, vacancy rates, delete the words, and if necessary, for the regulation of the commercial property market.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. And I thank Deputy Miles for her proposition. I think in her speech, Deputy Miles talked about trying to find a practical solution or process which can lead to solutions for something which can be a problem at different times, something which rears its head, which is retail areas which have vacancies which bring down the kind of character of the area. I want to start as well, sir, by saying that in St Helier, I think it's really important that we do understand that Jersey has a really good retail offering, particularly along King Street. Queen Street, which has had problems with vacancies, is being done up, as we can see. There's plenty of activity. The Infrastructure Minister is investing in the public realm in Broad Street and elsewhere on King Street, and we can see a very vibrant and improving retail space. But that said, there are streets around. Now, if I think about Columbry often has vacancies, and sometimes that's part of the churn, but sometimes there are vacancies which stay for quite some time. So I think, and I know obviously from P67, we talked about Le Quénové precinct, and Deputy Miles obviously has concerns there. So there's no question in my mind that I am happy, particularly as Deputy Miles has indicated, to be happy to accept our amendment, and I'm happy that the combination of Deputy Miles's proposition and the Council of Ministers amendment creates that practical situation whereby we can really get to grasp some of these issues. Before I talk specifically about my amendment, I would like to refer to the Comité of Connétables amendment. And the reason is because I want to make it really clear that by not accepting their amendment, I'm not trying to be belligerent or awkward. I'm actually here to try to convince them to vote against their own amendment or even withdraw if they wished, because I think there may have been a misunderstanding due to a lack of consultation on my part, and I accept that, and I apologise for that. That was also partly due to illness. I think the Connétables may have felt that there was a great deal of work heading their way should their amendment not be maintained. I want to really confirm that that isn't the case, that the reason we asked for the Comité de Connétables to be part of Part A was because we've already seen in St Helier, working with the town team and the Constable of St Helier, how the government working together with the town team, we have been able to work with landlords, but that kind of approach of the parish and the government together has really worked with landlords, has helped us do up retail spaces whilst they're not in use, to give them window dressings, window displays, effectively to allow the to encourage the landlords to open up those empty shops to us. And so the work that Part A talks about with the Comité de Connétables isn't about sitting down and drawing up lots of rules and regulations. It's about us working with the committee where there is a need, and that would not be in all parishes by any means. That would be, I have to say, St Brelade is highly likely because of St Auban and Le Quénové, St Helier, where this work is already being done, and possibly St Martin and Grouville with Gorey and the Gorey village area, Montorgueil and the Gorey village areas. And so off the top of my head, those are the areas that are most likely to be involved. There are obviously some small retail spaces. St John has St John's Village, but I think it's highly unlikely that we would focus on that area. It's not an area that has many vacancies, I don't think. Certainly doesn't have any shops. And so I think there has been a misunderstanding as to the work that would need to be done. And it really is a case of my department picking up the work. But where there is, let's use Le Keneve as an example, where there is the possibility of perhaps getting some use, some temporary uses into some of those shops in Le Keneve, it would be working with the Constable and his team to engage with landlords to open that up. It isn't about some onerous piece of work, it really isn't. Part A, just to go through my amendment itself, Part A is about the importance of making sure that even when a shop is vacant, that we have practical ways of engaging with the owners to open up those spaces, whether it's just for a window display, whether it's for a charity to go in there, to take over it on a pop-up basis for a short period of time. The amendment would enable, in conjunction with Deputy Miles's proposition, would enable us to establish those sorts of engagements and via other parishes as well. And we can talk about fiscal mechanisms. I think that is a discussion that we should have, but that's not something that we necessarily need to finalise. It's something that would need law at the end of the day to do that. But again, we would be doing the heavy lifting in the department. Part B, about commercial leases. And again, this is a matter which I think is quite important, and throughout this process, working with Deputy Miles, I have always been aware that Deputy Tom Coles did approach me 2 or 3 years ago to highlight an issue that constituents had brought to him around commercial tenancies, and that he was concerned there were issues with that. And so when Deputy Miles came with similar issues, I realised that, you know, when 2 states members are talking to me from very different parts of the island about similar issues, then there likely is something that we need to do with here. And Part B, with this amendment, would help us gain the information so we could publish a set of best practice standards and guidelines for commercial landlords. And I think that's really important. At the moment, there isn't that available to prospective tenants. And whilst I absolutely understand that and believe strongly that somebody going into business is going into business, they are not, they do not and should not have the same protections that we just debated recently with the residential tenancy law. I think that somebody's home is very different to somebody going into a business. But at the same time, we really do want to support entrepreneurs in this island, and commercial tenancies can be a very difficult place for the uninitiated to tread. And if we can make it easier for islanders to understand the commercial tenancies that they're going into, then I think that would be a really huge help for entrepreneurialism in Jersey. It would take away one of those barriers to setting up a business. It could help small businesses grow larger because they would feel more willing to engage in contracts, because the contracts themselves become more understandable and they know what they are signing up to. So I think that work in Part B would be really, really helpful to islanders, any islander who's either running a business or thinking setting up a business. Part C, Part C is very much a response to Deputy Miles's original proposition, which in this area, she's absolutely correct about Deputy Higgins's past proposition by this Assembly, but the work in her original proposition was very onerous and costly. I think Deputy Miles had a £500,000 figure around it, and I think that would have made it difficult for me to kind of accept Deputy Miles's proposition. And so what we've sought to work on here is a practical route to achieving similar benefits, but without having to go through the legislation and maintaining an up-to-date property register. But we do believe that this will help us understand where ownership of commercial property takes place, and gives us another route to part satisfying perhaps Deputy Higgins' original proposition. So with that, I ask members to support my amendment. Whether the Constable's amendment is accepted by the Assembly or not accepted by the Assembly, I would still ask them to support this amendment, and Deputy Miles would then happily be able to support her proposition as amended by this as well. So, but obviously prefer the committee to contact to be part of the process, because I think it's really important to engage the parishes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Minister. Is the amendment seconded? Yes, sir. Thank you. I note the time. Is the adjournment proposed?
Yes, sir.
Members content to adjourn until 2:15? Yes, sir. 2:15.